Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Jane Allison, Director of Creative Writing, and this is the absolute best event of the year. Last year I had to say that twice because we had poetry one night and fiction the other, and so I was lying obviously, but now, no, absolutely, this is the one, this is the only one. And it's after working with these fantastic second years for the last 2 years, it is really such a pleasure and so exciting to see what they choose to read this evening. So of all the work they've been developing and changing and looking at again and revising and trashing and throwing out and starting all over with and polishing yet more, to see what they choose to read tonight as their very best sample of their work. It's kind of like, it's like the sort of fabulous living anthology. And it's such a pleasure to be here for this event tonight and to see them and hear them. And the people who make this possible are here. They are, I'll include the first years who are going to introduce the second years who have been working with them all for the last year. They are the family, the parents, the partners, the siblings, all the family, the pets of our second years. The faculty, my colleagues, for all of us who have been reading and talking with and talking at and listening to and reading and rereading these 10 young writers, it's often a rigorous pleasure, but it is a pleasure, and it is always, always interesting. So thank you to my colleagues as well, and to the people who make everything happen and keep everything floating, Jeb and Barbara, you are wonderful, this program lives on you. And most of all, to the second years. Congratulations to you, can't wait to hear what you read, and saying that, I'm going to stop talking. What we're going to do is have 2 sets of readings. The first for the first 5 people, and then a little break for 10 minutes or so with some coffee and tea in the back, and then the rest. And a first year is going to introduce a second year, and we're going to go in a kind of twinned alpha order by genre. It won't matter, you'll just enjoy it, and those of you doing the work know what we're going to do. Okay, so welcome to everyone. Thank you for everything that you've all done to make this happen, and let's go.
Can you hear me in the back? Good, cool. My name's Sean. I'm going to be introducing the lovely Sara Brickman. A few weeks ago, a couple of the MFA students attended a Passover Seder at my house. Sara just returned that day from across the country after being featured in a poetry reading all the way in Seattle. She was somewhat jet-lagged, but nonetheless, Sara still joined us, just as the sun was setting and the ultra-sweet, nauseating Manischewitz wine was being poured. Now, being Jew-ish, and having not been to a Passover in many, many years, I've pretty much forgotten all the prayers and the stories in the watered-down pamphlets that were distributed that night, a 30-minute quick guide to an awesome Seder. But luckily, I sat next to Sara, who clarified for me the symbolic foods on the Seder plate, who told me that eating a sandwich made of matzah and maror and charoset is just about the best thing you can eat. That night, I rode the curtails of Sara's voice that carried across the dining room as she sang the songs and prayers of her ancestors in Hebrew. She filled in those voids for me that I have forgotten, and in a way, Sara that evening was like her poetry, completing an act of remembrance. Her poems open a door to one room and closes the door to another, embodying the living architecture of consciousness. Sara's tonal leaps from conceptual to vernacular, from tangible to surreal, explodes into this energetic, emotional intensity that mines the complexity of human relationships, all while interweaving the natural world and pushing the boundaries of the imagination. But she also extends her poetry beyond just the personal, and I'm always grateful for poetry that does that. The poet Patricia Smith has said, "Coming up and learning to be a poet was about how I learned to be a witness. Not a perfect witness, but a curious one." And I love that distinction, how they're not necessarily interchangeable. It seems to me that Sara has that curiosity, which is so central to being a poet, to just want to discover. Ladies and gentlemen, Sara Brickman.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Sean. That was really beautiful. So before I start, I just want to say thanks to my parents, my partner Mark, to Jeb and Barbara and Jane, who have saved my sanity on so many occasions, and to Lisa, Rita, Greg, Paul, Deborah. I would not be the writer that I am without you. I'm already getting teary. This is like, and especially to my cohort, Michael, Landis, Quinn, Valencia. I feel so lucky that I got to be here with the four of you and that I got to share this experience with you and get to know your friendship and your intelligence and your kindness. And I'm just really grateful for that. All right. I'm going to read 5 poems. Field Guide. Here you can see the castle of self-doubt, constructed before we have records of that time. There in the courtyard, a man might sit and call himself your friend. The cliffs are our own marble, excellent for hewing out a statue. You will notice the many species of finches, mangrove, vampire, each with its own call, though indistinguishable to foreigners. Because this is an island nation, the ecosystem has developed in quiet isolation. Many of these birds are prized for their feathers, but extinction has never been recorded. Scientists have studied each unique family. They are never seen to breed, but seem to renew. There are many models of silence in this town. I am told it is the custom, why the people stand so still. Here, I ask you to permit me a personal aside. It is not only how he claimed my body in the dark, but that he did so while pretending to love me, while believing he really did. In some countries, a man chops off his own hand for deceiving himself like that. This is not one of those countries. Trigger. Inside every moment, another time thorns. Teacup of burr, nestled in gold leaf. The mind a place as much as a reckoning. Whose body is this? My body asks, when gentle fingers press into wrong and startle a nest of cobras alive from their dark and hidden home, writhe into the light across a branch of scarred wood. Switch flipped or made of the long reeds you float through. It touches and reminds. Your bones, always waiting to be renumbered, named into a new arc, one that carries 2 of every memory, built for a sea where even in the sun it rains. Ode to the things that haven't killed me yet. When that man I loved said I was worthless, I believed him. I knew I was a greedy bitch, to want love and also freedom, books, but also the flame, to want to smash all the plates and still eat the candlelight. When he said, "I love you more than you know," I could only imagine what that love looked like. A flightless bird he'd strapped to a plane, but wouldn't teach to fly. 2. In the country of my mind, ruined dogs roam the forest. Once a month, they enter my house, streak blood and grass across the cabinets, count the kitchen knives, leave. I know them each by name, but I can't tell you. I can't leave their fur rubbing against my calves, their growls that keep me awake. I have to keep them alive. 3, company is better than no company at all. 4, so I moved to that city, ran from the love on the coast who could not love me back, to the arms of that man I thought was my friend. I wanted to be myself. I did not know who I was. And it did seem, after a lifetime of being told I was too loud, unwieldy, unseemly for a girl, that perhaps I would have to shrink. Demanding love had not worked. Asking for love had not worked. Perhaps if I simply stood still, did what I was told, waited to become. 5. The dogs eat out of my hands. The dogs eat my hands, but I don't mind. It is good to know at least what parts of me can nourish. 6. I mended shirts. I cooked and cleaned. I came to bed. I did not question loudly. I broke and screamed. I built of my body a home for lies and gave them shelter. I birthed in my mind a kennel, blood-soaked sand, family made of his hate, raised them, bleached bones for them, mended shirts, thought this is how a girl becomes herself. 7. You wake up one morning and you are not where you started. You are not where you began. You wake up one morning and find yourself in strange trees. What do you do now, child? But enter among the wolves, but learn to eat as they eat. 8. Men say, I never hit her, as if that's a badge of honor. And it's true, he never hit me, and aren't I a greedy bitch for wishing sometimes he had? At least then everyone would look at me like an ancient ruin, something that survived. Instead of a barn, I set fire to myself with all the animals inside. 9. So become the greedy girl. Stand at the door to the mountain shrine and sound the chime of keeping your blood inside your body. 10. The dogs come to my door. They howl in the language he taught me. Howl for scraps, for the parts of my body they have not already eaten. Okay, I can tell you their names. Doubt, dishonor, the blood moon, the mistress, anger at the beloved, anger at the self, belief in thieves, belief in the past, what he did to me. Why couldn't I leave? My fault, my fault. They howl, my dogs, like they could offer me relief, like they could show me what love looks like if I would only feed them. But I'm a greedy bitch. I want to keep living. So the only thing you need to know about this next poem is, if you do not know the story of Hanukkah, Sean already called me out for my Jewishness. The story of Hanukkah is that after one of the destructions of the temple, in order to try to celebrate the Sabbath and light the lamps, people went through and tried to scrape oil off of the walls, and there was only enough oil to burn the lamps for one night, but that it burned for 8 nights. Miracle of lights, ode to my imperfect love. And a year after we move into our second home, you hang the spice racks crooked. Olive oil and paprika slant, just a little bent to the eye that's looking. Dear one, who insists the risotto does not need more broth, with you I eat dirt-crusted cilantro, wash and rewash smudges off the same knife, and my rage is a terrible reflection. My need for perfection coiled in my hand, turned in at myself, turned out at you, sweet one, who sips from my collarbones all my failures, like a moth drinks the rain, clouding a web. You cannot change me. You cannot change what has been made ruined inside me, what ruined city he built. That life where the Lord dictated my ways, it did not keep me safe, though I felt safety. It was as the angel speaking of Isaac, a deception, a test to survive. I did not survive. Love, every day I walk these crumbling streets and remember how he always had a right way for boiling water, melting snow, for prayer, for not believing in God. And oh, I am grateful we fight over how to chop the garlic, ending that end with your hands, stirring the sauce and kissing me anyway. Yes, every day I wake with you is another day I stand in the temple in my chest and scrape the animals he dragged by their hooves off the walls, roll their fat on my ragged torch. Every day I scrape the oil, and every day it is not enough. Yet every night, miraculous, obvious, how it burns. And this is my last poem, and it's for Mark. Google image search for interracial couple. Look, there we are, wearing scarves, eating yogurt, waving at friends, pregnant on the beach, pregnant on the couch, as lesbians, eating salad, drinking champagne, licking each other, wearing wedding dresses, Christmas sweaters, back in time, 60 years ago, 90 even. So then I search for old-time interracial couple, because I'm white and don't recognize the implications till after I've typed, but here too, surprises. Not the Jefferson I expected. Top 10 interracial couples you never knew about. So I read about Loving and Jeter, about Frederick Douglass, first wife Anna, a black woman, about his decades-long affair with German feminist Tilly Assing, who, when she learned of Douglass's engagement to his second wife, his white secretary, 20 years younger, shot herself in the head in a Paris park, or jumped off a bridge, or swallowed arsenic and walked into a river. The internet is not a place for clarity or facts. But I get it. Tilly, how she loved a man who did not love her until it was too late. How, when he finally did marry that white woman, even the abolitionists decried breeding, mixing. Even his own children broke contact with their father, so maybe he did love her, but could not, or at least that's how I see it, because I'm white and terrified. Someday you'll leave because I can't ever really be there for you. But look, it's us eating pizza, wearing hats, arguing on a therapist's couch, us with piles of gold chains and money and velvet. It's us with music, it's us with bouquets, it's us as famous couple, Betty and Barney Hill. who led a quiet life in 1961 till we saw a ball of fire in the road and followed it, only to wake hours later with no memory, our clothes torn, our bodies strung to the bright lights in the sky. It's us under hypnosis, both describing the same alien abduction, writing down our experiences. Look, their long fingers, their almost human voices. It's us in the papers, us historians can't make sense of. The details we report in separate rooms, too similar. My love, I'm here. I'm sketching a map in the stars to where they wanted to take us. A shared delusion, perfect, no one can explain. In America, in 1961, they lose 3 hours. Their watches never run again. They loved their children. I'm looking at the photo, posing for the Sears Roebuck flash, with roses in their hair and lapels. They're smiling, whole. There aren't any photographs of them after, but I search for hours. Thanks, y'all.
Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm introducing Ethan. In a story I wrote for last semester's workshop, I made the mistake of having a forsythia bush bloom at the wrong time of year. This might not seem like a big deal, but landscape is the one thing I usually get right, so I was worried. But maybe, I hoped, as class began, nobody would notice. And for a while, long enough for me to think I had gotten away with it, no one did. And then Ethan spoke up. "I'm looking at the paragraph on page 2, he said, and I'm a little confused about your timeline." This is Ethan. He's incredibly smart, careful, and thoughtful, both as a reader and as a human being. Nothing slips by him. He was, after all, the one person to notice my first-year anxiety and assure me that UVA had not made a mistake by letting me in. He's one of those people who just knows things, like what time of year forsythia blooms, or what the little window above a door is called, or what to say to make somebody feel a little less alone. Which is all to say that, as expected, Ethan's intelligence and curiosity shine in his fiction. In one of his stories, you might encounter a colony of sentient, rapidly reproducing magnets, or a lonely highway that leads from a real city to an imagined one. He once turned in a piece told in a tangle of crisscrossing numbered sections that required a diagram to properly read. And there's often a haunted, hypnotizing quality to the worlds in Ethan's stories where, to butcher a beautiful line from one of them, everything that passes through them passes as if underwater. They are inventive, exciting, and always a little bit strange. But Ethan's fiction is most remarkable for the way it engages both the head and the heart. His are stories that demand you look at them closely, even when, or maybe especially when, it's hard. He shows us people at their most vulnerable, people who are recognizable, imperfect, and heartbreakingly human. Ever since we read the opening chapters of his novel earlier this year, I've been asking with increasing desperation when I can finally read the rest of it. So far, he's giving me no real answer, which is very upsetting to me. But what I'm saying, I guess, is that in his fiction, he always makes us feel, and he always makes us care. And isn't that the goal? I think so. It's been such a pleasure to get to know Ethan this year, both through his wonderful writing and as a friend. I can't wait for you all to hear him read today. Please welcome Ethan Feuer.
That was so sweet. Thanks so much, Olivia. Yeah, I didn't know when forsythias bloom. I had to look that up. Okay, all right. Thanks everybody for coming out. My family in particular for making the trip. And they're standing in the back. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Thanks to the program, to my cohort. It's been really great being here, and of course, thanks to Mandy. It really wouldn't mean anything without you. So I'm going to read from a story. I didn't want to read something too downer, so this is, Whatever Happened to Adam Lowe. It was in the weeks before I met Adam, when I was living on a tree-lined street in South Brooklyn with my brother Emery, that a story reached the local news of a visitor to the MoMA who had fucked a painting. The docents told the TV news people that the perpetrator was a local resident who'd been coming around for years. The painting in question was Chuck Close's large mark pastel, a granular 4x5 portrait of a somewhat surprised-looking, and who could blame him, clean-shaven man of middle years with a round, egg-shaped head, a clean left part, aviator glasses, and buck teeth with a small gap between the uppers and lowers. You can guess how that went. The patron appeared briefly on the air, accompanied by the police. He was graying and disheveled, but suffused with the vigor of a much younger man. He couldn't really explain himself, only kept saying, "I've been coming here for years," which, docents or no, killed me and Emery dead. "I have been fucking this painting in the face for years," we would shout at one another, randomly around the house. I pretended to like the joke more than I did. I was 5 years out of art school and hadn't had a single show. "There's technique and a sweetness to your work," one gallerist had written me, bizarrely, "but you must break into the house whose windows you are at present only gazing into." Odd echo of the claustrophobia I had begun to feel in visiting the museums I'd adored in my teens, new to the city. But it wasn't jealousy toward Close, more like fascination with an intensely personal connection. If anything, I was jealous of the fucker, who I sensed must have a special bond, a newness with large mark, and perhaps other Closes as well. A pioneer of his own passions, that's what he was, and at his age. In my imagination, Close learned of the story and felt disgusted, outraged perhaps, but also secretly a little flattered. As to large mark, I couldn't then imagine. My pseudo-envy of the art fucker remained a secret from Emery. A person of easy pleasures, a pensioner failing to explain intercourse with a painting was a kind of Christmas to him. So I admit that I did sometimes shout the line about the painting's face out the window at him as he left for work, simply to bask in the joy that it gave him. But Miss Kravchuk put a stop to that before my meeting with Mike. Neighbor and dour expat battle axe, she shamed me with the story that I was scaring her cat. I say work, but Emery didn't really have a job. He played piano at the Human Karaoke Bar on Canal Street. The customers would come in spectacularly liquefied at 12 or 1 p.m. and shout, "Play Super Mario music," at him. And then they'd sing along as he plonked it out, periodically shoryukening acoustic ceiling tiles into the plenum until they passed out in the booths. As a painter, I was somewhat worse. I worked in a laundromat to stave off my loans, but the body of our income came from Kara, my sister-in-law. She bought several of my drawings and things when she was home for the summer, and supplemented Emery pretty regularly by post. I remember once asking him if he didn't think this was a bit vampiric of us. "Art is an advanced form of beggary," he told me. "It's because no one gets their arm lopped off and starts screaming, 'Get me to a Liechtenstein, stat!' If you can't live with that, the rest is just added humiliation." Easy for him to say. I was the second-order leech. Anyway, Kara made mid-six figures that year, designing sort of amphibious ATV jet ski doodads for an extreme experience vacationing company, which took Goldman Sachs or whoever to Antarctica and let them ride around for a week or two. The tour company was headquartered in Canada, but she would come to New York every couple of months to visit me and my brother, that is, her husband, also her parents and brothers and so forth, who all lived on Ocean Parkway, way out and down where it sort of dithers and turns into something else and eventually gives up and dies. Perhaps it seems strange that Emery and Kara would marry only to spend all of their time apart, but it seemed to work for them. In fact, they had briefly lived together 2 years prior, and Emery had confided to me that it had been the worst 6 months of his life. "It's like we put our relationship in the microwave," he'd said on the phone before asking if I'd rented out his room. My boyfriend at the time had recently not so much dumped me as wandered off in the way a child abandons a tedious parent at the supermarket. I didn't need to think twice before I asked Emery to come home. Kara never told me in so many words how living together had been for her, but Emery was scheduled to work afternoons through late nights and did most of his own projects, in sound design, on a deafening pair of rocket woofers after 1 a.m. He ate kimchi in the stairwell and never took out the garbage. He went on a road trip to Georgia once and brought home an itinerant minister. I could guess how it had been for Kara. In this way, as the only known human who could successfully cohabitate my brother, I served a vital function in the Emery-Kara relationship ecosystem, and Kara's support of what I had increasingly come to perceive as my worthless and unsaleable art was a gentle but constant reminder of this. It was a friend of mine from school who eventually saw in the art fucker what the rest of us could not, and by week 4 had shaped him into a breakthrough solo exhibition that I absolutely did not want to go to. I could just text Owen, I said to Emery, night of, say I have plans? He was standing in the kitchen, spitting hangnails into the sink basin. Just go. It's not like I know him that well. Just go. I can't find my keys. I have food poisoning. Perseid meteor shower. Let me say it in robot voice, he said, ticking an imaginary switch on his throat. I raised my hands. Perhaps the thing to most resent about Owen was how hard he was to resent. He was soft-spoken and shy, with a southern lilt, sole gift of an impoverished West Virginian upbringing. He lived hand-to-mouth as a hospice aide out in Bay Ridge, and his work was so consistently clever and labor-intensive that it was impossible to imagine anyone else accomplishing it. In this case, he had printed and posted throughout the city 6,000 weatherproof posters featuring the fucker's face verso with the directive, redraw me as your lover, and a blank space recto in which to do so. After 3 weeks, he'd collected the posters and arrayed them in a rented warehouse, whereupon he'd produced 60 iterations of a portrait meant to blend the responses into some kind of citywide ur-lover. I was at number 39 and Mike number 44 when I saw him. He looked late 20s, a pouty Viking's ghost, blonde and shaven and slow-eyed. He was tall, but slouched over his drink, as if to lean into the painting before him. Mouth set, eyes wide, skin suffused with such paleness that it seemed whatever light fell onto him was simply never permitted to leave. This gravity, I would later discover, which permeated his appearance and character alike, and arrested me from the first, was a property not entirely his own. But that's a story within this story, as perhaps gravity should be, of Adam and Mike in me. So I made my way toward him through the goulash of beards and Ray-Bans, sidelong, lazy, like everything was only a coincidence, but 10 paces was where things became difficult. No one spoke to him, he spoke to no one. He looked at the paintings as if they meant something to him in particular. I remembered once climbing up out of the subway and seeing, first thing, a rainbow spilling across the entire vault of Lower Manhattan, and no one was looking at it. Only as the show wound down, and I saw Mike approach Owen, did I find myself able to move. I recall the first word I heard him speak was card, as in the object leaving the palm of his hand. Its stock was translucent like the man himself, and Owen pocketed it without a second glance, nodding but always looking sideways from their conversation at every third word. Owen, I said, before they could break apart, this is fantastic. There was a space before my name, Arthur, and when he said it, it was all he said, as if it were the end of something else. And he began to nod, so I began to nod, and on the stereo, Philip Glass restarted. I looked to Mike. Mike was watching Owen. Owen was darting glances across the room, and we were all nodding like motherfuckers. So glad you could come, Owen said. Wouldn't miss it. He leaned forward, clasping both my wrists. I have to, He pointed at an angular, smartly dressed woman by the drinks table. Sorry, I'd like to catch up after, though. Text me? I nodded. Owen turned to Mike, touching his shoulder. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Owen was taller than me, but Mike towered over both of us. He ducked his head, eyebrows knit. Beaming, Owen winced slightly at our shared silence. Even on his night of joy, Owen was too well-mannered to blow anyone off. Sorry, do you two know each other? Maybe, I suggested. No, said Mike. Still, your face looks familiar. My face is many places, he said cryptically. Right, Owen said. Well, Mike, Arthur, Mike. We shook hands. There was a brief silence into which Owen disappeared, and Mike closed his eyes, a bit too long to be a blink. He was perhaps disturbed by the noise of that aggressively modern space. He can be a little short, I said when he reopened them, as if I saw Owen all the time, as if we were co-conspirators of some kind. I asked him if they knew one another. Mike shook his head, looking me over. He'd been offering Owen a job, illustration, he said. I wanted to say something brilliant, but all I could come up with was, he deserves it. He's really talented. A nod. Mike's lips turned upward slightly, and I felt my mouth twitch in mimicry. There was a moment of frank assessment as those sculpted eyebrows turned up again, a 3-act play of discovery that took place entirely in the round trip of his eyes from my face to my hands and back. Then he withdrew a second card and gave it to me. On it were printed the words, Lucky Longshot Visual Voyages, a phone number and address in Brooklyn, raised in gold on frosted leaf. He raised his shoulders, flexed his fingers against his thighs. Mike didn't speak 10 more words to me then, I don't think. He smiled a little without teeth, showcasing a sweet, intransigent brittleness. He wasn't unfriendly. It was more like he was stunned by the world, a wolf child still learning to form his words. He paused between syllables like he was sad to watch them leave him. I wanted, even then, to touch his face, to toggle his heavy eyelids with my thumb like advancing frames of film, and blink my eyelashes against his tender throat until he begged me to stop.
I'm Bobby, and I'm introducing Michael Dyne today. Michael told me once that from the minute he started writing poems, he discovered there was no end to what he needed to say. Spend a year with Michael's work, or just an afternoon, and there's no question about that. In Michael's work, the need to say, the need to intervene and rise through the poem comes out of loss. The loss of a father who is both longed for and everywhere. He is in the stars on a road trip. He is reaching for an orange in the kitchen. He is imagined as a young man, very much like Michael at the beginning of Love. He is even writing these poems, as Michael tells us at the end of Tennessee. Reader, if you believe one thing I tell you, let it be this, that as Jesus sketched my portrait, I sat cross-legged on the floor and wrote, I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you. And yes, I was high and in love and crying, but I really did feel my father's spirit move through my body, that he wrote those words, not me. The excruciating nearness and distance of the father pervades these poems, but it's also true that two figures emerge as heroes in Michael's work. The incredible mother who has not left, has not been lost, and the incredible woman he meets here in Charlottesville. In the latter, in Nicole, Michael's poems grapple with the beauty of the beloved and recognize the possibility of a life shared with a companion. As Michael writes in Self-Portrait for Nicole, I realize I am not finished becoming. Maybe the hour is empty because it's leaving space for you, my pale torso glimmering in the halo of light over the bed. In the former, in the mother, Michael's poems sing of a bond that is inextinguishable and eternal. They cling to her and are comforted by her, and they yearn for her happiness in ways only a Michael Dyne poem can yearn. In Untitled, the poet writes, what I would give to see her at the age I am now, to dance through that house, to swallow its golden light. So please join me in welcoming a friend to us all, a beloved to a lucky few, and a beautiful, gifted son, the one and only Michael Dyne.
Thanks for making my mom cry, Bobby. That was really beautiful. Thanks. I feel really honored and grateful to be here and to have been here these past 2 years. I want to thank my teachers, my friends, my family for coming all this way, and Nicole for everything. Okay, I'm going to read 5 poems. This first one is called To My Father, the Light. In the room, there are 2 reels projecting onto the wall. One is playing your death, and the other my birth. One starts in a bathtub, the other staring up at the sky, both in a pool of light, of water, of blood, voices flickering on the soft flame of my ear. One starts with Mother holding me up for your embrace, light passing through us, thin as a blade. One starts with your eyes closing, then opening for the last time, planes disappearing above you. One starts with nothing, and one ends with it. Cries like empty vowels shot through the air. Where else could I go but deeper? The light pours over my hands like a wave. I'm at the shore, your ashes on my fingers, your hands through my hair. The light cuts through my chest and I'm blown open. It spills out like your blood on the tarmac, the first time I made love. The reels catch fire. I tried to save myself, leaning against the wall as your image dissolves beside me. I can't see you, only the light you passed through to get here. So a few years before I came to Charlottesville, I was working facilitating these grief support groups for children, kids who were the same age I was when I lost my father. And so this next poem describes a night at this group where we were playing charades. Afterlife. I'm in San Francisco again, in the basement of that big pink church on the corner of 14th and Judah, handing Max a scrap of paper with the word heaven scrawled in cursive. Music is vibrating from the patchwork carpet like a prayer on fire, the reds, oranges, and yellows matching the sweet flame of his cheeks as he steps out in front of us, conducting the other children from atop a piano bench, waving at empty spaces as if something were really there, something we can't see. And so they begin to act out his drama, what he needs to be real. Running around the room in silent fury, beating their bodies together as if they could feel their lives unraveling, they pretend to kill each other, not knowing what their hands could do if they pressed them hard enough in the right places. But these kids don't understand death, thank God, or their own bodies. These kids whose mothers and fathers jumped from the Golden Gate, or died of cancer or a brain aneurysm, sometimes they don't even know what happened. One morning, Max's father just didn't wake up. And now there's a room full of children playing dead on the floor, so Max comes down from his throne and touches each one of them, the newly dead, and they rise one at a time and begin to spiral around the room like little angels whirling around me. I didn't know this could happen, that there's a place where I can see myself as I once was, and a room full of children with no mothers or fathers, dancing, I mean really dancing, in the basement of St. Anne's of the Sunset in San Francisco on a Wednesday night. This next poem is called Living Room. I know there's nothing here but your residue, the way a body might ignite from within and burn inside out, leaving what? A pile of ash, an image of you that can't get any older. I can feel you too, like the smoke a candle leaves after it's blown out. The space your body filled is still here, empty, waiting. I want to understand the moment you stopped breathing, who held your body together as your blood pushed it apart, spilling out onto the afternoon. And when I tell people it was Father's Day, I always laugh a little, because it's a joke. It has to be. Then I remember the night before, all of us on the couch in the living room laughing about God knows what. And I think that if I try really hard, I can live in this moment forever. I say, Dad, tell me a story. And you tell me about the first time you and Mom made love. how it didn't feel so different from the way you feel now. How you could feel along her ribs your own death, as if something inside her might open up and overtake you like a flood of light. Maybe this is what she means when she says she can feel you in the room. This next poem is called 95 South. Busted tires like half-open birds. That's how you describe them. Or maybe you say gutted, something more beautiful. Trace how they fell with your finger, graceful, idiotic, as we burn through the Georgia coast. Maybe you name them for your father. Everything he could have said, spilled onto the blacktop. You hold your hand to the rusted light, flickering through the pines, folded just above my knee. Who knows if this is the one where you take the penknife and cut a ring around your finger, or the one where heaven opens and bodies fall from the sky like rags. Maybe this is the one where I'm already the person I've been waiting to become. One night at St. Anne's, I had the kids make timelines of their lives. They unraveled fits of yarn in their hands and stitched them wall to wall over nothing. Like a needle from the other side, that feeling I thought I'd forgotten. My dad died today, left the city, started 4th grade, all written on Post-its, pinned to thread. It's one thing to remember, another to not forget. A girl says, "Can I start with my birth?" I ask her if anything happened before that, her eyes bright with wonder. We're getting closer to St. Cloud, to your father's house. The sun falls over your side of the car, and I have to squint to look at you as you fold down the mirror, drawing the corners of your eyes. And when you touch your blood-red lipstick to your lips, I think of times you've held my father's name in your mouth, how this means you know him well as I do. And because this could have ruined me but didn't, I want to tell you everything so you can remember it for the both of us. How we kept switching rooms after he died, how we couldn't stand to be in the same place but were too afraid to leave. I've ridden over the memory of that day so many times, it's night. The first time I slept in the last room my father woke up in, I heard a moth in its bad wing rip up the hardwood floor like a saw. The door fluttered like an eyelash in a dream, and the voice on the other side said, "I don't want to leave either." Each room in that house remembers me differently. I've listened to my mother read my poems to my father in bed, as if he was there beside her. But sometimes she'd arch her voice upwards to the attic, where I'd lie on my mattress on the floor, listening to her mouth my words to him, back to me. This is my last poem. It's called On Silence. When my silence, like a fist clutching shards of glass, opens, you ask me what I remember. A light bulb pressed firmly into the blood, a hand on my shoulder, and a woman bending to whisper in my ear. I am standing in the circle with you. I squeeze your hand, and you squeeze the hand of the child next to you. We move like this around the room. You turn and ask me what I want. Our touch incandescent, everything opening like a mouth into words. The mouths of your eyes, the mouths of your lungs, the mouths of our hearts open like sky, and I have so much to tell you. If this wasn't our story, it is now. The childhood I never needed to remember. Those empty summers in front of the TV. How I learned the body's false edges, that we don't end. And because no one asked, I said nothing. I waited and nothing came but the hand on the other side. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasted so much time getting here. I say, our pale flesh swallowing the moonlight. Tell me you wanted this too.
That was amazing. Okay. One of the pleasures of reading Daniel Hamilton's work this year has been learning about the film industry and its discontents. Daniel writes about the people I wondered about whenever I sat there after a movie, watching the credits roll, looking at all the names. Who are all these people, I wondered. Well, I wonder no more. These are the names of the film rats. They're the people building sets, of course, and doing the lights and the lifting, but they are also the people chasing raccoons off the set, or maybe hurrying onto the set between shots to position an iced Americano just right so that an actress lying hogtied on the floor can sip it through a straw. To hear Daniel tell it, these are the people who source pig carcasses and cheap swords so that experts hired by the History Channel can hack at the meat for a historically accurate demonstration of combat at the Battle of Thermopylae. These are the people you don't see in the movie, and without whom the movie would not exist. Especially given that this unseen crowd includes the person who crouches beside the camera, doing the delicate work of ensuring that the scene is in full focus. We never see this person in the movie, yet the movie is quite literally this person's act of seeing. As many of us know, Daniel is an ex-film rat, and once was that crouching person who focused the lenses. His novel takes its title from a certain lens, the modern anamorphic, a lens that Daniel's narrator characterizes as follows. Anamorphics were the pinnacle of the craft, lenses that fit a larger image onto the film frame by squeezing it horizontally. They yielded panoramas that seemed to fill all of space. They made things better than they were with just a piece of glass. That's Daniel's ambition in an image. He wants to see it all. The action, the extras, the now and the next. He captures all of it with curiosity and generous attention to detail, making it new. It has been a pleasure to see what Daniel's mind sees. In the non-novel writing he's shared with our workshop, he has also imagined a father's candid address to one of the men who helped build the atom bomb. He's shown us the goat enclosure of the first fully functional lunar petting zoo. Even in the strangest and harshest of settings, Daniel finds and magnifies dignity and hope. His characteristic lens is one of wonder. It's a mature wonder, grounded in the scientific, but never stuck there. In Werner Herzog's documentary about the men and women who work in Antarctica, Herzog coined a good phrase for it. Daniel's is the province of what Herzog calls professional dreamers. And I would have ended this here, but it needs to be noted that, of course, Daniel finished his thesis right before his fiancée Heather gave birth to their son, Julian. If that's not grounds for a moment of Hamiltonian wonderment, I'm not sure what is. It's amazing to me that when Julian's old enough to think about this sort of thing, he'll get to know about how April of 2017 was the beginning not just of one great story, but of two. I think that makes him a pretty lucky kid. And with that, I'm so glad to welcome, not via Skype, not by proxy, but finally live and in the flesh, Daniel Hamilton.
Thank you, Piers. That was lovely. Not a single word of what I'm going to read has anything to do with the film business. So, but yeah, first I want to say thank you to everyone, the faculty, Crystal, and especially my thesis advisor, who helped me. Take a 700-page monstrosity and turn it into a 250-page minor monstrosity. So, so thank you, Chris. Unfortunately, all of the shorter parts of that monstrosity Chris made me cut, so there's nothing to read from that book that isn't 45 minutes long anymore. So the first thing I'm going to read is the Goats on the Moon story that Piers mentioned. This was kind of the first thing I wrote right after I found out that my wife was pregnant, so I was very much thinking about the world that I was going to leave for him, for my son, and he's here now, so it just seems appropriate that I read it. In the full-length version, there's a bit of a preamble, which I'm going to cut for length's sake, but all you need to know is that we're on the moon, and everyone who is at this particular moon base is there for the express purpose of having children. They're all married couples who were sent there to have babies because it was cheaper to grow babies on the moon because people weigh a lot and they're mostly water, and there's a ton of water on the moon, so if you can just use the water on the moon to make people, you can save a lot of rockets. The second thing I'm going to read is very short. So this first thing is called The First All-Mammal Lunar Petting Zoo. And Jules, this is for you in 25 years when you know how to read or listen to words. The goats landed first, and so they were Barry's favorites. More than that, they were cheerful, even in the weird, rangy darks that came at the edges of the winter when everything but the Malapert Peak slipped into the shadow of the far craters. There were no sunsets here, just a wall of dark smashing across the world, the distant ridges vanishing without warning or gradient. We call it a terminator, Guinevere told Barry when Barry kept saying sunset. The transition from light to dark. Terminator, just so you don't get made fun of by astronauts. Barry nodded without listening. Of course, they had lights in the habitat, but the color temperature was off. Full spectrum diodes weighed more, so the hab lights had a silver sheen that turned eyes to glass. Nothing looked right. The goats didn't seem to mind. They chuffed and scratched their jowls against his motionless hand whenever he held it outstretched. He was trying to maintain a veneer of professionalism. The psychologists had insisted on it, actually, over the video links from Earth. Despite your loss, you are not alone, and fulfilling your responsibilities will give you a sense of purpose, Barry. On and on, like that. He tried. But sometimes, when the billy would bite, or the female, Fabiola, would forget the low gravity and leap right into the ceiling, his laugh pinging through the corridors persisted to such worrying excess that NASA finally insisted on cutting the live feed. Fears of lunar madness and all of that, nothing personal, Barry. What, he found himself saying often, talking to ground. Oh, sure. When he'd first opened the hatch for the zoological transfer capsule to see Fabiola in there, suspended in her thrust harness, bleeding happy as if Malapert were some rangy, fenceless highland, he lost his far stare. Not forever, but for a little while. The billy, Dick Feynman, proved immediately to be the more troublesome. In the 1/6 gravity, Dick's liberal spraying of urine had overwhelmed his diaper and pooled in the low spaces of the capsule. The odor of it overwhelmed even the electric taste to the air, so when they cracked the airlock, it was ozone, faint edge of hypergolics, and Dick Feynman's grassy piss stench curdling out. Bah, Dick said. Once he'd got them out of the harnesses and the diapers and into their habitat, the others insisted on purging the hatch and venting the exhaust gases straight to the vacuum. We'll eat the fucking O2 losses, Barry, the commander said. Anything to get rid of that goddamn smell. He'd had enough literary theory in undergrad to know about the pathetic fallacy, but even still, through the hatch porthole, he saw a change in Dick Feynman's expression when the locking pistons battered shut. He wasn't sure if goats could cry, because he was not that sort of zoologist. Fabiola and Dick Feynman stood there for a little while, legs wobbly, lurching from side to side and bouncing off the walls, before they laid down beside each other in the far corner and slept. He watched them for a long time. The weeks passed slowly at first. The goats tended mostly to themselves, and the crisis of the medical fire still had not entirely abated. The commander had everyone but Barry on shift and a half. When Barry said that a task would clear his head, the commander gave him real astronaut work. Think you can manage the rover? Is now a bad time to tell you about my suspended driver's license, Barry said. There were no keys to toss, and from out on the plateau, the mountain yawned into the light. The radiator wings of the reactor station dazzled, brilliant as an electric arc up on the peak. Down in the crater, the habitat was not impressive, smaller from the outside, if that were possible, the thermal blanketing already smeared with regolith and ejecta from the landings. The medical module looked wrong, even from a distance, but he turned away. The shadow of Malapert moved slowly, but in the vacuum, dark came suddenly. When he jumped from the rover, he stood in the EVA suit and held his hand out towards the west, letting a light slash down across his visor, watching it angle over his arm like a razor, now just the anodized blue of the wrist ring, now just the sooted padding of the glove, now just his fingertips reaching for the Terminator. Dark. He couldn't see the Earth. The next zoological transfer capsule carried 2 adult Ossabah pigs, sedated, 2 adult Thompson's dwarf alpacas, sedated, 2 Himalayan pika, 1 neutered American marten, a genetically self-sufficient colony of Horsfield's tree shrews, and 2 edible dormice. Some NASA wag had written on the manifest, edible dormouse, 2, small mammal, note, do not eat. Only the tree shrews were intended to last beyond the first few months. Permanent habitation was never the objective. The moon was to be a single-species satellite, beyond the odd insular community of research tree shrews or stowaway Streptococcus aureus. The groundlings were sure the other animals would die too quickly to require a major reprioritization of life support. The low partial pressure of oxygen, the substandard gravity, the constant stress of noise, enclosure, poor diet. The animals were sent to Malapert to die, and Barry, the lone zoologist on a planetoid for all of its spinning history, as devoid of life as the interior of an autoclave, was to study how and why the animals finally died. If they did not die, he had little work to do. When the animals did not die, then, it was another subject for terse discussion with Barry over the video link. It's a question of resources, Barry. You can't allow yourself to become attached. Sorry, what was that, he would say, failing to look up from the digital library consoles where he read about the breeding of goats. For a while, he developed various covert and wildly in contempt of regulation schemes for secreting the animals away somewhere, in an engineering reserve or the pressurized annex of the reactor station on the mountain. In waking dreams, he was always stealing the logistics rover, stuffing Dick Feynman and Fabiola into the pair of backup EVA units and strapping them to the roof, terracing across the regolith with Guinevere screaming at him over the radio to turn around, goddamn you, Barry, you loose cannon. In the end, he simply ignored mission control's commands to stop feeding the animals, to depressurize their habitat, to strangle them. The others left him alone would continue to leave him alone, so long as they continued to frown and soften their gaze in the dining spaces when he passed, so long as they continued to sport black armbands on their suits beside the color-coded identifiers they wore so the cameras could tell them apart, so long as they continued to fly the wire-tautened flag outside at half-mast. There was a period of grief imprecisely determined within which he could do as he pleased. They were implicitly his goats, since he had little else of his own now. The others left the animals alone. We understand the magnitude of your loss, the ground psychologist told him. Mourning takes time, but we are counting on you to remember that you are a professional, Barry. Not immediately, not tomorrow, but soon. The others left his animals alone, but expediency determined it was time to clean out the coiled husk of the medical module, bullseyed in its ejecta pattern. Guinevere and the commander went out in their EVA suits and picked through the debris. There would be few remains, at least. By the time the fire had ruptured the pressure vessel, telemetry was pinging over pressure, temperatures to melt calcium, hydrazine decomposition in an oxygen-rich environment. Bad data for sure, the ground loop was saying. It's got to be bad data. It hadn't been bad data. They had already cut the umbilicals. Guinevere was standing there at the emergency airlock, watching Barry as if to try to stop him from rushing to open it. Barry had not rushed to try to open it. He just watched through the window the modules glow and buckle, and when the walls split, the flash loosed a spray of atmosphere, frozen so it caught the sun's rainbow, and the fire going still where a crystal glittered, something oxidized, last flinders arcing long for the horizon, falling too slow, but falling. Over the radio, they asked if he wanted a token or memento. Like what, he said. There's some lab equipment that survived. I think this was a dewar. I think this was a diffraction chamber. What's that? Barry watched through the window. What about that catch basin, he said. Is it intact? Mostly, Guinevere said. I'll take that, he said. The first children were born 6 months in, which raised a few eyebrows. It was thought the placenta might detach with the launch accelerations. There had been pregnancy screenings leading up to liftoff. A minor scandal broiled away in Houston because it was Uemura and the commander, professional astronauts both. They should have known better. Anyway, it was twins, 3.7 kilograms each of them, and yes, despite the 1/6 gravity, they still had all their toes, little hands, the spotty pallor of first breath. Their surroundings seemed to have no effect on the carrying of their cries, which was, with little margin of error, experimentally verified by all the residents of Malapert. They were used to noises by then, but consonant noises, the keen of fan bearings aging out, impellers gnashing, carbon scrubbers like the brakes of a far-off train. The babies were all vowels. Their mewling filled a space to find a note that they all had been holding in distant recollection. It was somewhere around the 5th birth that Guinevere even took Barry's side in the arguments with Mission Control, now so worn in that even the psychologists seemed tired of insisting Barry dispose of his charges. Funding cuts meant, anyway, that there were fewer psychologists to argue with. So the stench muted out, or Uemura figured out the right odorants for the filters, or they so longed for earthly rot that they left the hatch to the animal habitat open now. The animals ate nothing but hydroponic watercress, chicory, vitamin supplements. Their habitat smelled of greenhouse, lingered as a heat in the air, through which the tangs of metal and refrigerant oil and fungicidal aerosol could only barely cut. Barry had it lovingly decorated, segmented, menageried. The marten had killed one of the pica, but the survivor had a little hutch made from the thrust chamber of a landing rocket. The tree shrews kept still to their launch cradle, a weird ant colony cube of finely bullheaded aluminum, encasing a warren of plexiglass tubes that reminded Barry of some cellular structure he could never quite place. Splenetic pulp? No. And the edible dormice remained uneaten, but small, hidden away in the nest he made for them out of the salvaged catch basin. Both the pigs died, undeliberately, but then with no small relish eaten, and one of the alpaca rather mysteriously suffered an epileptic shock precipitating cardiac arrest. Working theories were that the frequency of the diode lighting was bad for the visual cortex of even-toed ungulates, and Barry insisted on replacing the lights in the animal habitat after that. They had no other lights, and so he fashioned from the tallowed grease that collected in the urinary recycler a wax thick with ammonia, wicks cut from the cotton nightgown his wife had included in her personal weight allotment. No use to it now, he said, after he stretched it thin over his gathering bulk one drunken, lecherous Halloween, and he lit the habitat with candles. The living alpaca, of course, had lost most of its fur to some uncaught genetic aberration or dietary deficiency, and so was too horrific, by candlelight or no, to be shown to the children. Barry fed him alone in the deeper recesses of the goat pen, where he kept mostly to himself. The kids were not allowed to pet the marten. Fuck, he bites, Uemura learned the hard way. And the pica was camera-shy, chittered and shrugged attention, hid in her rocket engine. The goats, though, were just that, brash, blissfully excited for attention, given to laugh, and, in the low gravity, leap side to side across the habitat, spinning in space, bouncing, reckless. They kindled laughter. News from Earth was that the Clathrate gun had finally gone off, and there were a few brush wars threatening to become more than brush wars. The Arctic was up 8 degrees, the Dow was off 8,400. So much for my 401k, Guinevere said. Don't expect more than a few further supply transfers. Good night and good luck, all of that. They were afraid, but not in despair. They were pragmatists and expert. The odds were long, but not impossible. Barry attended his secular duties, microbiology essays, soil fauna, playing nurse to Detanti, the one surgeon who had not died. But mostly he tended his animals. The tree shrews were maintaining genetic diversity. The dormice had a litter of pups, blind, albino, but alive. He had hopes that the goats remained viable. It was going to take time, but he had books and books on animal husbandry. This was the arc of history, of progress. He was at the end of it. He was capable. As the children grew, it was, of course, Dick Feynman and Fabiola who most commanded their affections. Dick was prone to fits of urination, but Fabiola was milder, and so, after Barry took the billy back into the pen, scratched his ears to sleep, Fabiola would mother up against the children, be comforted by or offer comfort to their tiny gathering warmth, as out beyond the portholes, the Terminator smashed across the lunar mountains with violence beyond a challenge. So I'm going to read one more. It's very short, and I'm going to read it because there was a rumor going around that my car had finally exploded, which it just broke, and I fixed it. So that's what this story is about. So this is called Automobile Maintenance versus the Heat Death of the Universe. The first thing to go is going to be your good looks, but after that, it'll probably be your timing belt. They could build them with chains instead to last forever, but belts are cheaper, and they figure you'll probably never look to see what's under all that plastic. Just assume there's metal down there somewhere. Metal lasts a while. I had a timing belt snap once. Forced induction, interference engine, valves bent to hell, and bites in the top of the pistons, shaped like moons, planets, like some other body, lit glancingly by faltering light. All lights faltering, if you think about it. I spent $8 grand and 3 months putting the fucker back together. It fired on the first crank, which made me proud. All I forgot was to tighten down the ground strap, so it wobbled and died out on the mesa in a snowstorm. I crawled under in the slush to get at the bolt. I've never been happier. Although, I've since had a kid, so that's no longer accurate, but I crawled under in the slush to get at the bolt. I've never been happier. I've still got that car. It falls apart like everything. I fix it when I've got the money. I'm not comfortable with belief, but that's the closest thing I've got. Thank you.
Particularly fitting to introduce Quinn today, as she offered such a beautiful tutorial of my poems in Lisa Ruspar's workshop earlier this semester. It's hard to believe that workshop is now over. We all feel that way. I hope I can live up even a fraction to Quinn's gracious and thorough reading. I admit I was also so excited when I found out I was going to be introducing her that in a moment of enthusiasm, I blurted it out and gave away the surprise, which I hope Quinn can forgive me for. I might have to order some Thai food to atone. Over the last year, I've come to appreciate and admire Quinn's facility as both a poet and a reader, a classmate and a critic in the best sense. Quinn approaches all these endeavors in a manner both precise and generous. Just as she strives to meet our work where it is, she gives witness simultaneously to life's grit and life's beauty. In Quinn's world, we never forget that a college house laundry room is a cold cement floor coated in mysterious stains. But we also learn such a mildewed basement can be a site of communion with others, even with the divine, so that when the speaker of the poem says, "Praise to the moment when our knees grazed the dusty floor and we forgot everything besides our own shaking bodies. We don't just believe it, we experience it. Quinn's poems will capture both your senses and your intellect. They evoke the steam-clouding apple cloudus that all of us from workshop are still craving. They remind us, both painfully and tenderly, of the awkwardness of early adolescence, when your first bra straps are showing and you watch jealously as your classmates kiss on the Ferris wheel. Her poems blend Bunsen burners and neuroscience, moments of Taoist philosophy and casting the I Ching. It's not just that her poems themselves open up to the mysteries of the universe, from the tiny mysteries of our own blood cells and blood type, to the strange, perhaps disturbing mysteries of the holy, like Mary and Gabriel at the Annunciation. No, it is that her poems open us up as well. Please welcome Quinn.
Thank you, Sasha. It's okay, you don't have to order me Thai food. And thank you all for being here. We're almost at the break. Yay. And thank you to my cohort, to all of my professors, to my family for traveling, my mother, father, brother Jackson, and boyfriend David, and everyone else. Thank you. The first poem, I'm going to read 5 poems. The first poem takes place in Charlottesville at the Tea Bazaar, which is kind of a weird place. Tea house by day, hookah bar by night. And my brother visited me a couple times while I lived here. This is about the first time he visited me. It's called At the Twisted Branch Tea Bazaar in downtown Charlottesville. Jack and I leaf through the expansive menu, our eyes catching tea Kuan Yin, the same tea our father used in his ceremonies, spooning the curled leaves with a bamboo scoop into a red clay pot, absorbing more flavor each time he brewed. We came to love its taste, like baked grapefruits, I say. Smokier, like incense, Jack says. I think of winter afternoons in our cold New York dining room, trees bare out the picture window, our thimble cups burning between our fingers, the 4 of us circled around the table, murmur of boiling water, bowl of oranges between us. This tea Kuan Yin, the menu says, is monkey-picked. Does that mean monkeys approved this tea, I ask? 9 out of 10 monkeys choose tea Kuan Yin in blind taste tests? Jack says no, pointing to the fine print. Monkeys pick higher than humans, reaching the best leaves from the misty peaks. We order, then wonder if there are monkey labor laws, established days of rest, and how sanitary little monkey hands could be. When we pour out the ceramic pot, our tea is dark, not the usual color of wildflower honey. Our server is sorry. She gave us golden monkey, not monkey picked. Soon we have 2 pots of monkey tea. Golden monkey was our mother's favorite anyway, so we drink in her absence too, alternating between its rich, full-bodied storms and the mellow, roasted tones of our father's choice, until we get so caffeinated we feel psychedelic. The walls shifting, steel drum beats echoing, our eyes quick, unfocused, and we are unsure of our place in the twisted branch. So we stumble down the steps and outside, steadying our saturated bodies, blinking into daylight like newborns. I am thinking about round things, teapots and bowls, small clouds of steam, Venn diagrams, globes, how the world goes on without considering its speed, how even as we think we move forward, we are one step closer to returning from wherever we came. This is called Playland, which is an amusement park near where I grew up. Playland. I want to take you. So much for me was learned there. 4 of us girls floating the shaded cement paths, alone in summer. A space we were free to wander without parents, trying tank tops that showed our bra straps to the world for the first time. August before 7th grade, a teenaged boy looked us up and down, then up again, edges of his lips curling. We rode the dragon coaster over and over, a stocky man with half-closed eyes, always taking too much care to check our seatbelts. One visit, just before school began, we spotted two of our classmates making out in the Ferris wheel car opposite ours, steel spokes of the wide circle like arms stretching us apart, our distance constant, precise. We stared in awe, in disgust. We crowded to one side to get a better look, their movements the ebbs and flows of the tides. We shouted their names into the wind in some desperate need to let them know how openly we gaped, in some hope we'd make them stop, that they'd look up, dazed, and remember themselves. They didn't hear us. I didn't know this would be our last time there, as we followed them around and around, and I couldn't look away. Two bodies balanced on shapeless breath, always reaching the top first, always missing the view, and me, watching them, missing it too. This next poem is a pantoum, which is a form that uses a lot of repetition, so it's made up of 4-line stanzas, and the second and fourth lines of the one stanza become the first and third of the next, and it comes full circle at the end. Don't worry too much, just repeating lines. It's called Pantoum for Cleaning Up. I don't really mind doing dishes. The warm water's like a bath for my hands. I lose myself in the rhythm of soap and sponge. I can wash and wash and wash, and the warm water's like a bath for my hands. It seems David never had to do the dishes. I can wash and wash and wash, and David meanders to the couch to read. It seems David never had to do the dishes. He had said he would help, but instead, David meanders to the couch to read. I stack white plates on the drying rack. He had said he would help, but instead, I remember how at 18 I knew somehow, as I stacked white plates on the drying rack, I'd better start not minding doing the dishes. I remember how at 18 I knew somehow, even though I'd never had a serious boyfriend, and I started not minding doing the dishes. My mother warned me dishes were constant. Even though I'd never had a serious boyfriend, watch for families where sons do nothing, my mother warned me. Dishes are constant. I'm on vacation with David's family, and watch for families where sons do nothing. After dinner, the men get up one by one. I'm on vacation with David's family, and they all meander to the couch after dinner. The men get up one by one. I run the faucet hot, soaking the pans. They've all meandered to the couch. David's mother dries and thanks me for running the faucet hot, soaking the pans. I lose myself in the rhythm of soap and sponge. David's mother dries and thanks me. I say, I don't really mind doing dishes. This is called Cave Girls. In the days before I turned 5, everyone kept saying, "This is a big one," smiling as if they knew a secret, until I believed that I'd be able to fly. What else could be as big? This was the story my parents sat me down for, as it was told to me at 5 years old. My best friend lured from the front yard and into the back of a man's car, driven to the airport terminal, and while they waited for the next plane, she found a policeman who brought her home. This was the moral. Don't let that happen to you, and if it does, find a cop. And tonight, almost 20 years later, in the unknown way conversations sneak around, I learn everything that was kept from me then. Small body, quivering, covered in sperm, penis forced into mouth, clothes torn. I can see her perfectly at 5, her bob cut of thick brown hair, her little teeth, one missing, the pale pink sweater her grandma knit. At recess, we played cave girls. She was Crystal and I was Diamond. And we pulled on our imaginary galoshes, and when we went down the big, twisty slide, it meant we were entering our secret cave. And how did she slide into that cave? How did she come to school at all and run outside, laughing, afterward? The night before my 5th birthday, I hardly slept. I could see myself pushing up off the living room floor and sailing out the open window, lifting higher than our apartment building, higher than the distant blinking lights of Tarrytown, and there would be no secrets anymore. We would all talk freely, each knowing we could fly. And I could reach up past the tip of the Empire State Building if I wanted. But I wouldn't go that far, that high. Not yet. I had time. I had my whole life. This is the last poem. It's the title poem of my thesis. It's called City of Imaginary Numbers. It's about math, but you don't really need to know math. And imaginary numbers, square root of -1. I don't know why I said that. That's not correct. It is referred to as I in math, and so I'll use that a couple of times, lowercase I. City of Imaginary Numbers. We have no life plans and nowhere to be tonight, so David and I build a city of imaginary numbers. City of I. It starts at the 24/7 burger place, our blueprints, as we try to track the mathematics of the background music, then our conversation, then our hands, then the realization that if God is a number, how many goodbyes can pile up inside us until we rip like paper bags? So we create a complex plane, another dimension. We unhinge ourselves into it, sculpt a shapeless skyline like the sharp whistle of glass, fill a library with pieces of night, spiral a staircase in the ways our bodies turn, dig a graveyard and bury all bright electricity in hospital drug highs. Small city, but like a wild stretch of land, but like a constellation of every us we've ever been a part of, but like a perfect line. At the center, David plants a garden of imaginary numbers. They'll take root, multiply I into 2I, 3I, XI bounty of imaginary, floating the space like arias of honeysuckle and wintergreen, spring onion and summer squash, cloudberry billowing on and on. But for now, just soil and seeds. David says, "Here, this is for you." And we drop down into the vegetable beds, lying and crying from sleepy joy, and I say, "Please, live here with me." He says, "Yes." And then, how fast we fold into sleep, and lucky us, it's all we need. Thank you.
So it's true, we're at the halfway point, so we can take 10, 15 minutes. There should be some coffee and tea in the back, I hope, and we will reconvene. Thanks. Alrighty, here comes part 2.
Hello, I'm Phil. I'm going to be introducing Chris Knapp. So, I think the most surprising thing I've learned about Chris Knapp over the past year is that he used to be a lacrosse player. Where I come from, Long Island, New York, lacrosse is a pretty big deal. And the large majority of lacrosse players I have encountered tend to embody the very arrogance and unchecked aggressiveness that played so important a role in the decimation of the indigenous Americans who invented the sport. But in Chris, in his writing, we find a deep awareness of human suffering, a sensitivity to the awkwardness of being alive that is the very opposite of the weird ignorance which drives men to hit each other with sticks. He is an extraordinary talent, a deep thinker and a patient writer. His work is personal as much as it addresses the greater issues of human life in the 21st century. Through a style that blurs the line between fiction and autobiography, he mines his own experiences for insights that reveal to us the errors of selfishness on both the individual and societal levels, insights that speak about the great struggle of the human spirit to propagate itself responsibly in a world driven mad by its endless appetite for more and more, insights that describe to us the pendulum swings of love which define the relationships we have with the people in our lives. This he does with acrobatic sentences that twist and flip and cartwheel toward their surprising conclusions. And though they speak entirely of very real things, they evoke the underlying dreamishness of life. Though I've already said this, it bears repeating. Chris is an extraordinary talent, a writer who summons from the murk of the moment the philosophical grandeur of existence. You, with whom he is going to now share some of his work, are about to be delighted.
Thanks, Phil. That was really nice. God, even if I limit myself to people who are here, there are just too many people to thank. One person who's here, though, that I have to thank is my wife, Lola, who's come here from a long way away. Last year and this year, a lot of people didn't believe she was real. Actually, a student of mine's here all semester. I'd mention my wife, and they'd all kind of look at me like, right. Who would want to marry you? And I get it. But I'm going to read something that maybe doesn't explain it, but at least takes us all the way back to the beginning. So just to give you some bearings, there are going to be 2 places that this short reading takes place: in Paris in 2016 and in New York in 2011. It was actually probably the last time that skinny ties were cool. So I think that's all you need to know. This section of Paris was the province of tourists who were stunned and disoriented by the rising water, by the slight distortion of the familiar world. Everywhere you looked, they teetered over their feet, under the destabilizing influence, it seemed, of a certain nervy ardor, hitching their pants up over their hip bones as if they'd all left their belts in the airport. And in the circumstances, it was strange to walk among them, to be confronted with their distrait, mammalian scratching, to stand with them at the rails and watch tame little eddies of the current drip downstream. My wife and I had been discussing how we might celebrate our anniversary on such a severely attenuated budget, but we soon found ourselves talking about that original year, the year in our mid-20s that we met and got married, the first lifelong commitment either of us had ever made, and accordingly the first time either of us had understood our lives as delimited by eventual death. Imagine, she said, you could interrupt us on the night we met, you could pull us aside and say that we'd be married by the first day of the following summer. What would either of us have made of that? We agreed that it was almost unthinkable that, having spoken to her only briefly during a visit she made to the restaurant where I worked, and considering that I routinely found myself cowed by the prospect of contacting even women who had given me their phone numbers with the clearly stated expectation that I would call, it was unthinkable that on a night off, I would take the train across Brooklyn to get her number from the resume she'd left, and that I would dial it that very minute from the bar, to my own astonishment and to the astonishment of my co-workers looking on, who knew me as hapless and shy and catatonically irresolute. And what's more, she said, getting to her favorite part of the story, that she would agree to see me, would suggest we meet that very night, either at a party that I planned to attend, or a party she planned to attend, or at any of the places she or I might visit along the way. It was on this occasion, as the night wore on, and our signals continued to cross, that I became familiar with what I came to think of as her house style. Her insistence on sending erratically punctuated text messages in all caps, as if to convey an ongoing baseline of enthusiasm and disquiet she'd felt since arriving in New York, at the thrill of being young, of being abroad and alone, of being broke and unemployed and a little bit afraid. A baseline to which no further typographical emphasis could be added, even when it developed that we were about to pass within a few feet of each other, riding trains in opposite directions on the Williamsburg Bridge. And even hours later, when we finally found ourselves within striking distance, and she sent me the name of a bar, the worst of the many dives within a 6-block radius of my house, where, when I arrived, having missed last call, she invited me to share her drink, a drink that, like all her drinks that evening, had been paid for by her date, a nice man named Rob. To whom she introduced me cheerfully before thanking him for a lovely time and taking me by the hand back into the street. It felt good to tell ourselves this story. Contained in the telling, there was a certain provisional hope. Walking by the river in Paris now, a memory came to me that I hadn't revisited in quite some time. How wonderful it must have been, I said, to be spinning through the streets with you toward my apartment in the cool hour or so before daybreak, to be speaking loudly, staggering theatrically, laughing at nothing in particular, giddy in anticipation of each other's bodies. I could remember catching our reflection from time to time in the dark storefronts we went past. And now it occurred to me to wonder, I said, to what extent were we pretending? To what extent was it possible ever to be so present? Because we were on my very block, and this was the memory that had come to me. We were on my very block, within view of the plants in my living room window, when in the dark street ahead of us, a girl on her bicycle went down with sickening clarity, as if an invisible fist had come down on top of her. When we rushed up to help her to her feet, she was bleeding heavily from her chin. More blood than they would have let her donate had already stained her face and arms, the white front of her shirt, her bare legs, and the pavement at her feet. After a moment of staggering, her eyes stopped rolling in her head, and having taken in the sight of her blood and its meaning, she began to shriek and thrash about, not in pain or shock, but as if she thought that we were responsible for her fall and wished her further harm, a development that, in the injustice of it, bewildered me to the point of paralysis. It was only a few weeks later, my wife said now, that this same girl, still braless, her chin bandaged and presumably tightly stitched, came into the restaurant where my wife had found work, looking into my wife's face as she recited her order without giving the faintest sign of recognition. Somehow, my wife found herself wondering how much of her blood, when she'd finally come into the care of medical professionals, had needed to be replaced. We had learned that her name was Virginia, a coincidence that occurs to me only now, the meaning of which eludes me. That night, the night of her fall, it had taken the better part of an hour to get Virginia on her way. Not least because she didn't have health insurance, she refused to move from her perch on the curb, which she'd taken up only after exhausting herself with a rather ineffective access of violence she directed at us both. Refused to so much as budge until her roommate arrived to collect her. The two of them and the limping bike soon disappeared around the corner at the end of the block, leaving my wife and me in stunned silence to watch them go. The several thick pools of blood she left behind soaked into the pavement even as we stood there. And even after the street sweeper had come and gone the following Tuesday, the faint traces of these stains remained. I studied them from my living room window, from which they looked like continents on the map of an unfamiliar world. And now I believe that it was standing there at my window, I told my wife by the river. It was standing there with a cup of coffee at my window where in those days some of my finest contemplating took place, that my present admiration for her began to form, in view of the grace and firmness with which she brought the situation under control, with which she'd made this flailing, braless white girl calm, where I had succeeded only in making her more frightened than she already was. In view of all of this, it was clear to me, I said to my wife, that the feckless lightheartedness that had carried us through that night was in my veins, where, as she was coursing with stronger stuff. Thank you.
When speaking about poetry for any extended amount of time, Landis Greenville might say a certain word which both defines her poetics and at the same time frees her from definition itself by the very nature of the word being, of course, leaping. It is perhaps what Anne Carson refers to as action of the mind, captured on the page, or what Joy Graham says about the project of a poem. Poems don't want to make the reader agree, they want to go from body to body. Landis writes poems that propel us into the spaces between. Often, the speaker knows more than we do, speaks in the prophetic tone of her kin, Sappho, Dickinson, and more. And like them, she is not afraid to fracture, to be multiple. Reading her poetry is not unlike standing before a certain painting that wows me. Or perhaps to exist in a moment of absolute attentiveness, the world described in new clarity, though not without the human voice attending to it with edges and limitations. It is leaping what she does, giving us the actual texture of the morning, then reprimanding us should we dwell on it for too long. As she writes, "Take no notice of the mist hemming your ankles. Cold is old memory. It will leave you soon." One can't get away from cross-pollinating her work with other forms of art when discussing her approach. Her interrogation and fascination with the color red is an apt example, as the color moves across her poems with nuance, a sincere sense of searching, at times taking on the graphite turbulence of a Cy Twombly piece, at other moments the realm of the pastoral, an orchard, the skin of an apple. More often, red informs the body, a womb, desire, hips, she writes, blotted the color of dropped wine. All that read aside, her poems stretch in a painterly way to suspend time, or in Bobby's very Bobby way of saying it, Landis has respectfully declined the linear. While I was bumbling my way through various experiments in form in Deborah Nystrom's class, Landis, workshop after workshop, turned in masterful poems in difficult forms, to which we would often collectively shake our heads in awe. Like when she brought in an arresting sonnet in which a swamp speaks and does so in rhyme, or an acrostic poem in which Persephone, letter by letter, devours her own name. Her titles themselves function as micropoems, sonnet without a volta, in a field of linen and red, you and I becoming landscape. Landis has a talent for scope. Her poems render both landscape and event, atmosphere and object. They hum and hiss and sing. Funny to think that Landis has said how much she envies those who can sing beautifully. For her verse transfixes and in turn transforms those of us who have been so lucky to have lives that align with hers. Landis is a devoted poet, reader, teacher, and friend. Walking up 2nd Street, she said, to our delight, "Come on, little ducklings." She has taught me to say little ducklings. To be a better listener, to live intensely with a good poem, to go dancing. I'm a better poet because of her and her generosity. So much of the fall was us exchanging ideas, those joyful and winding conversations towards some half-true destination like, doesn't a Charles Wright poem feel like an airy bungalow? Doesn't it? And how there was always a passing of books back and forth across the couch, along with a bag of frozen fruit, unceremonious in a way I like. Landis, of course, could name it better. This living I'm talking about, what she calls the sainted now. Please join me in welcoming Landis Greenville.
Thank you, Michaela. That was beautiful. And thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to my family for coming, and to my professors who are just incredible poets and teachers, especially to Lisa, who was my thesis director and helped me through that whole process. I also want to thank my cohort, who are incredible poets, and I'm honored to have studied with you. And I want to thank the 1st and 3rd years, who are generous readers in workshop and dear friends. I also want to thank Jane, Barbara, and Jeb for everything that you do for this program. And this program is amazing, and I'm really happy to have been here. So the first poem I'm going to read is actually that swamp sonnet that Michaela mentioned. So, Swamp Sonnet. Swamp has the bad kind of dreams, thick cities, paralysis, what teems alive under its single dark, watery eye. Swamp wonders if they are caused by the flat hunger lurking in its mucky, serpentine throat. Often, swamp feels like a boxing ring, archive of locked jaws and the sudden sucking thrash as one thing succumbs to another. If swamp could mourn, it would be river. Too languid, some say, shiftless, happy to sit in its own fetid, hemmed-in music. On gray days, swamp can get lost in introspection, all its spindle limbs sinking into itself, hours spent reflecting birds as they flit through and away. Somewhere a boat, a crest of tin-colored scales, all these interruptions. Swamp longs to be more cohesive, to pick up and leave, so it asks for a body in the image of a man spotted at its edge. Swamp is pleased with its wet shimmer and the implied sense of self when solidly it steps and water parts. Swamp says nothing of the muddy tangle of sticks and snakes moving it forward, the hundreds of frantic insects humming inside like breath. 2 stones to look through, slick with algae. Swamp is full of invitation. All it takes sweetly. And a fish caught there flaps itself wild in regular time. So much a human heart. So I've been working on a series of poems that are definition etymology poems for words that I find interesting or they keep reoccurring in poems that I'm writing. So I've given them their own poems. This is for the prefix on prefix. I will lie down and become horizon, scar of land and mercurial sky, face turned to the sea, fatherless and tasting of salt. Under my ear the earth toils on in unnoticing factory. Never born are the men who would map division, who would come to fear burn when they had only to learn fire. I am happiest in the unmade world. And this is one of the poems that talks about red pastoral, and it has an epigraph from Amy Newman's book Fall. Within the yes of her, she is a lake. Red pastoral. I am considering becoming a lighter ring of flesh around bone, unsnaring myself into air, little fox chewing the red fur down to a hobbled freedom, trailing a small river of self into clover. I am considering becoming field, prone woman covered over in green hush, in wind. So beckons the fence to the cattle, wander me, wander. I hadn't a wife's sense of winter then, to let me spot a house weighing the hill and go there. I recall the river heavying my mouth to pond, the trees crowding down in anxious company to observe me, thistle-gowned, as if asleep in the reeds. Water is a tyrant to what flirts its muddy edge. I consider the thicket of yellow flies, or they consider me, curling under blue. Who put me here? Unteachable, I simper the sky. And so this is another of the etymology series. Orchard, noun. As in, too fruitful to be pleasure or fragrance. As in, what little paradise man makes with an eye for order. Sweetly the farmer, and wretchedly the farmer, makes the long syntactic rows through the dirt to give the girl what she asks for, that bitten red, that unsugared tang of waste. A man makes a labyrinth to become a god, then fills it with anything that can run. And this poem, it came from a prompt that Greg Orr gave me. You asked for the girl whose sky is only ever a blur of kerosene before the flash. Fire is the usual metaphor, a bore. Arsonists make the giddiest men. From far away, the city looks honey-tongued in flame, all of it slipping to ash. The gray settles the red into silence, and eventually the mouth remembers it is good for other things. And everything has that look when it is leveled. The smoke stands up, like men in suits, funereal men thinking of rain. Damn the things that are that easy. It was nothing like that. No little witch singing in the pyre, no can of gasoline tipped down the back, no cigarette put out on skin. Let the city seethe itself to ground. I know what would not burn in that burning bush, how awful it must have been. And this is sort of a title poem from my collection. Notes on Red. The orchard was, and the knuckles of a man after boxing, the linen cast off the bed, a woman holding him in the red between her legs. Her mouth moving is the measure of triage. And no one dies of red, though it is messy. A field of bandage, a field of cardinal robes hung on a line. The perennial blood in my jeans. A nurse asks you how long since your last, and you say 10 years, and you say it's been a while, before they wheel you away. No, no one dies of red. In another bed I lay parsed from you, dawn crossing the window like a gash. It is the tulips on the sill in your white room, barely opened, like a nest of red-headed crates tasting the air, their necks roving over the edge of glass. Of course they are hungry. The smell is antiseptic, the smell is mopped green linoleum floors where the men unseam you. Briefly your body fills with light, that voyeur, and the uterus slips out through 6 fine incisions, suddenly reducible. And the anesthesia takes a long time to leave you. For a long time your face stays loose, like curtains pushed aside, red flowers in the window, a field of dropped apples, my hands in your hair, then bracing you as you stagger up to pee, red pressed to a square of sky and asphalt. I long to lift the gown, to make some sense of injury, a small line of blood in the pad in the bed, darkening to afterthought. Slick red in the dark, I imagine your body, once flooded, returned to night, its dumb procession wandering that echoing nave, cathedral they left under the skin. And this is my last poem. It's called Fever, 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 and it has an epigraph. Sing the beginning of created things. Fever, fever, fever. No more the white wrappings around the eyes, the accidental light obscuring to the edge of the captured frame. Just now a bright match, like a flicker of poppy, like a streetlight come on far in the distance. The scene is familiar. A woman in white, shivering in a dark yard, is easily mistaken for linen left on the line and blowing. Where the wind finds me, there is still the echo of touch. But want will pass by this house, and the next, like an unwelcome guest. Just now, the door is filling with scraps of dancing girls, red rising like petals, like flame, and everything is veiled in old bed sheets. I will be gone a long time. I have walked into that burning house. They say there's a man who can walk on water and leave no mark. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Robin, and I'll be introducing Nicole. Even before meeting Nicole, it was clear to me that I had something to learn from her. I knew this because, as a prospective student, I received a long and thoughtful email from her that left me curious and perhaps even a bit perplexed. How, I wondered, can someone write so expansively, so freely, without sacrificing precision or focus? Each word in this email had been carefully, perfectly selected, and yet the words kept coming. I believe that Nicole's talent, this ability to be generative yet exact, is precisely what gives her work such heart. She writes even when it stings, even when most would look away, and she states her truths without any sense of apology or reservation. Nicole propels forward, never afraid to be a woman who is loud and hard and tough, and at the same time, she is attentive enough to her prose to remain tender and vulnerable. Nicole's perseverant and meticulous nature is also present in the way she conducts herself in workshop and her own classroom, the way she remembers every detail of every story and offers what appear to be endless reading recommendations, always in perfect alignment with her peers and students' work.
This year has certainly confirmed my initial belief that I had something to learn from Nicole. It's been a true pleasure spending time with her inspiring work ethic and her brave, all-encompassing voice. Please welcome Nichole LeFebvre.
Thank you, Rhonda. I just want to take a minute to thank everyone in this community, which has given so much to me, especially Barbara, who I can always count on when I need a compliment. Jeb for doing so much, Chris and John for workshop, Jeff and Paul for reading my work so closely, and especially Jane for challenging me and pushing me into deeper, more focused writing. That's a funny word for my work. For my dad, who isn't here but is the source of so much inspiration. For Michael's family for traveling so far. For my mom and my nanny, who drove 11 hours to get here. And to Michael for everything. I have mascara on, so I will say no more. This is a short excerpt from near the end of my memoir, and Michael gave you a bit of a spoiler because he read a poem based on the same incident. Okay. On the way to dinner, my father asks, "Have any of your friends died yet?" He's finished reminiscing about high school, not paintball games or parties in the woods, rather a 35-year catalog of loss. 3 men from his class to cancer, 2 suicides, 1 woman in a high-profile plane crash, and a man beheaded at night while driving his motorcycle down a chained-off road. He twists the volume knob on the CD player. "It's a new Monkees album," he tells us. "One of the Monkees is dead, so there's 1 song reissued. The rest are new." "Dad," I say. He drums on the steering wheel. "What?" His wife sits quietly in the front seat. Next to me, Michael says nothing, which is easier, I'm guessing, than lying or telling the story of his friend or his father. And because I'm around my father, my nerves curve inwards, my face. I look out the window, not at Michael, to whom I should be mouthing an apology. The highway stretches in all directions, roads to more roads. A few birds, 3 feet tall, cross the median, red feathers on their heads like party hats. Today's my grandmother's 90th birthday. 2 days ago, I woke to an email from my father. The subject line read, "Ma took a spill, keep you posted." The email was the photograph alone. My grandmother on a gurney, hospital gown slipping off of her shoulder, face bloody, scraped the dark pink before bruise. I spent half of the road trip rehearsing how I would explain that this was a disturbing way to wake up. "You hit those birds?" my dad says. "There are fines." Close up, the road is littered with blown tires. The shards of rubber look like wings. 2 days ago, Michael and I drove 12 hours south from Virginia to Orlando. On the way, Dad called. He asked what activity we would like to do. He is a man who needs solid plans. I get this rigidity from him. I said I want to take Michael on an airboat ride. We'll skim across the swamp, pointing at the craggy backs of gators, the wind whipping mosquitoes past our ears. "I want to take you to the Salvador Dali Museum," he said. "Claudia has to work, but I'll take you too." I wondered why he'd ask my opinion at all. The older I get, the less we share. Politics, personality, how we think and move through this world. What remains is a mutual reverence for art, an awe at what others, when left alone, will create. It turned out the museum was another 2 hours south. On the way, I mocked my father for moving to Florida, all highway and hospital. Controlled fires clear the land by the highway for new high schools for the kids of the doctors in the hospital. The Sunshine State, he said, or as I call it, where Republicans go to die. He winced. Michael in the back seat pulled out his cell phone. "Hey, Guy, do you know the Florida Man Twitter account?" "What's a Twitter?" he said. "I have Snapchat." "Jesus, Dad, I don't even have Snapchat." Trump-Pence billboards fenced in the road. I didn't point them out. I told my father we would visit on the condition that we do not talk politics. I don't want to hear his reasons. It is clear he likes his leaders white, loud, and male. Michael read us the headlines. "Florida man on bath salts headbutts his mother, flees in police car." Florida man man has sex with gator, says it seduced him. Fleas in gold convertible. 16-year-old Florida boy poses as gynecologist, flees on bicycle. Yeah, Dad laughed at this last one. Outside the window, I see a billboard advertising vasectomy.com. At the museum, we stood in front of the paintings as told, absorbing the smallest details, blood droplets and olives, Voltaire, penis-shaped flies. In front of the double paintings, the docent told us to walk to the back of the room, then turn and look again. A pixelated homage to Rothko became an homage to Lincoln, cheekbones forming from the colored blocks. She said if we looked through our cell phones, we didn't have to step back. Dali couldn't have known we'd invent a shortcut to his deeper meaning. How surreal, viewing art in person through your phone. The docent then showed us an early work, bread in a basket so real you could grab it with your hand. A man in a fishing vest said, "Surrealism is a synonym for communism." Another retiree's cell phone started barking. His own dog, he bragged. The docent talked of Franco as savior. I was drawn to Gala Dali, the paintings of her as Mary, Venus, black and white photos of Gala in the ocean, Gala on the beach with a book. Beside her, Dali dangled like a stunned puppet, eyes wide, that mustache like string. The docent did not mention Dali's fear of female genitalia or his preference to masturbate in front of a mirror. Dali did buy Gala a castle. She accepted the gift on one condition: he could only visit by invitation. Dali replied, "I accept, since I accept everything on the condition that there are conditions." One photo summoned me from across the room. She has him by the hair as if post-beheading. Gala staring into the lens, wearing those high-waisted gingham pants, espadrilles wrapping up her calves. When I'm in a gallery, I like to stand in the doorway, turn my head slowly from left to right shoulder, and rush toward the first painting that catches my eye. This is at times about color. Bright blues move me. Likewise, black and red Dutch masters their luminous fruit. It can also be the downright ugly, the odd. In certain moods, it's nudity. I harbor a fondness for showy folds of fabric, velvet on skin, a single breast exposed pale pink. It is the least efficient way to view art, crisscrossing halls. In this way, it feels true and manic and driven by mood. At the Dali Museum, I was not drawn to the masterworks, but his smallest canvases, deep set in their imposing frames. The closer you look, the clearer his obsessions. Men bending for other men, a grotesque woman with genitals in place of her head, her calves muscular to the point of boils. Ants crawl across corpses, holes cut into backs. Gala aside, Dali preferred his women without spines. Inside the museum, my father did not interrupt the docent or make side cracks. I watched him study each painting, leaning close, arms over his chest, glasses low on his nose. Watching, I realized this was the first museum we had visited together. This was a shock. When I was little, he taught me perspective at the kitchen table. He insisted I not overdo my sketches, but rather kiss it. Keep it simple, stupid. Over the 10 years I lived in New York, he visited once for my college graduation. There wasn't time for a museum. Yet he's always encouraged me to create. He has always created himself. First underwater photography, then wood carvings. Now he paints so much, his nails are stained blue. In the gift shop, Dad bought Claudia a mug. He noticed a poster for the previous exhibition. "Dang it, Escher," he said. "I missed my favorite." My dad has the aesthetic of a college freshman. I know this is an unkind thought. He didn't go to college. He ran a laundromat when I was a kid, and then drove the maintenance truck for his father's properties, a few apartment buildings in Springfield, Mass. Winters, my father plowed out driveways until the sun rose. He always said he'd quit and move to Florida. He hated the snow. We're at the Olive Garden. Because Michael grew up in San Francisco and hasn't been to a chain, except In-N-Out if you count it. Prepare to be underwhelmed, I say, menu spread. Dad snorts. "It's not bad if you like your sodium with a side of pasta." The waitress stops by with our wine. Her black polo is flecked with Parmesan cheese. My dad reaches out to brush it from her stomach. From his mouth, a comment I barely hear, blood drumming my ears, about how she now owes him a tip. He's still laughing as his wife slaps his shoulder, then returns to her steady, straight-back pose. Michael's ears redden to match mine. I look at my phone and see 3 missed calls from my sister. Were you supposed to call into the party? I ask. When I told my father I couldn't afford the flight north for my grandmother's birthday party, he said he hadn't been able to get the time off work. He suggested that Loverboy and I visit instead. I agreed, thinking it was about time they meet. On hour 7 of the road trip, we stopped for boiled shrimp and a swim at Tibby Island. Michael bobbed in the waves as I read on the beach, toes digging through my towel, into the sand, all that buried heat. "Nicole?" Michael called out in his calm, questioning tone. I think I was stung by something. Twice. We jogged to the lifeguard stand. It was so hot the sand blistered our feet, so hot the lifeguards had left for the day, their vinegar wash stored away. "Mud helps," said the pale kid renting umbrellas. We stood in the tide, scooping handfuls of cool, wet sand on his calf and his back. When the water is warm, jellyfish cluster. Scientists call this a bloom. "Does it look bad?" Michael asked. I lied. "No." I took some photos, which I showed him only after the swelling went down. I later learned a group of jellyfish is called a smack. "I called Ma this morning," said my father, "but she won't remember. My grandmother has dementia, moderate to severe depending on the day. She's bored, quiet with confusion. She must feel always like she's forgotten something important. My father says she doesn't want a doctor. Pills would only prolong it. Before her own mother, who lived to 101, went into the nursing home at 98, still clutching her unexpired driver's license, she began to dial the microwave, speaking into the handle on the plastic door. Before I can remind my father it is rude to use cell phones in restaurants, he calls his mother on speakerphone. "Hello, Mom," he says, louder than necessary. There's a hint of teasing to his tone, each syllable stretched. "Do you know what day it is?" "Don't," I plead. When I was a kid, 10 and 11, we'd visit his grandmother in the nursing home. She'd sit in her wheelchair, tiptoeing closer to the upright piano as I'd play her old favorite, Casey Would Waltz with a Strawberry Blonde, and the band played on. Dad liked to play a few standard pranks. He'd hand her his cell phone, then stand behind Graham, talking in a high-pitched voice, pretending to be his wife, calling in to say hi. They'd hold whole conversations, the 3 of us kids, not quite teenagers, giggling on her bed. Before we left, we'd line up to say goodbye. Dad would flick his hands at us, mouthing, "Get back in line, get back in line." So we'd circle in for another goodbye hug, over and again. Graham would kiss our cheeks, growing flustered, eventually saying the same thing. "Oh, so many visitors." When I tell him to stop that it wasn't very nice, my father would laugh and say, "You'll do the same to me one day. We all get our turn." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm introducing Valencia Robin. I got to know Robin this year through our weekly rides to the MFA Reading series at Millie Joe's. She was always a minute or two late, just like me, but otherwise incredibly reliable. She could keep her cool while Quinn and I each gave her different directions from the back seat. And even though she really wanted to go out afterward, each week she would dutifully drive the tired Quinn and I home. In class, behind the wheel, and elsewhere, I appreciate the calm, kind, and creative energy Robin brings. Robin's poems are also beautifully grounded in the physical world. Elms, houses in Ann Arbor, keys in her box of paints, geese on the lawn, a city block. But at the same time, they create atmosphere that goes beyond that. There's a sense of nostalgia in many of her poems, not the small type of nostalgia featured in Nickelback's song Photograph, but a real pang for things lost, for things that never will be. Her poems take us beyond a physical life to the larger world, or a personal life to the larger world. Boys going to war, family ties kept or broken, how places change, what it means to be an artist. In a poem of Robin's that I love, she writes, "And yet that bright fluttering inside you, even back then, waves and waves of shadow and light, something pulling at you and through you." This is the very energy that moves through Robin's poems, the sense that there's something that can't quite be contained in the body, something just beyond our reality that must be put into paint and words. These are poems where the moon always has something new to say, where the blacktop of the street is a small galaxy, where the sky falls like leaves and people rake the blue into a pile. Our world, transformed and full of possibility. Please join me in welcoming Valencia Robin.
Okay, that was such a joke that I was the one who always wanted to go out. Quinn is having a fit right now. So thank you, Anna, for that really wonderful introduction. I also want to thank my nephew Sam for coming to support me today. I want to thank Jane, Barbara, and Jeb for organizing this place and rescuing us, you know, routinely. I want to thank my poetry mentors. I think that this Wednesday is probably the only Wednesday this semester that I haven't been in Greg's office. Thank you to Rita, Lisa, Paul, and Jeff. You not only have helped me with my poetry, you've shown me how to be a teacher and a mentor. And I'll never forget you. And then finally, thank you to my classmates. I've been saying for the, since I got here that I won the lottery. I mean, they are just incredible. And I can't wait to see you just sort of light up the world. So this first poem, the title refers to a disease that just killed all the elm trees in Milwaukee, where I grew up, and apparently all around the country. Dutch elm disease. When Danny Johnson's big brother was killed in Vietnam, Danny ran around the block 5 times. I counted. Ran as if when he stopped, his brother would be back in their driveway, washing his car. But nobody knew anything about time travel back then. Star Trek hadn't even come out. Lieutenant Uhura still on Broadway doing blues for Mr. Charlie. And even if Danny did understand the space-time continuum, his parents weren't having it. His mother on the porch yelling his name, his father tackling him on the front lawn, all us kids, the whole block, standing there on pause, which didn't exist either. No fast forward, no reverse. We weren't even black yet. Was Milwaukee even Milwaukee? Is the Lincoln Park Bridge still there? Do boys like Danny still climb over the rail, hug their bony knees to their narrow chests, and plop into the river as if there's no way his parents could lose 2 children? Which is all I know about Vietnam. That and the way the sun hung in the faded sky as Danny ran around and round and held the air hostage. That and the way the thick August air ignored the leaves of all our doomed elm trees and let itself be held hostage. The streets were like ghosts when they cut down those trees. Kitchen clock. Beware of my friend Jan's stories. The one about her tour of the famous church and the hysterical child. How the mother had to practically carry the kid out. The girl, 7 or 8, screaming, "I want to see God! I want to see God!" See what I mean? It was almost funny until Jan explained it was the day after the school shootings. And to think, I didn't even want to come to dinner. Had a bad cold, longed to be home in bed, but Jan was visiting, my friend who was trying to change her life, who'd quit her job, the dark room of her face lit for weeks with this ridiculous light. Yes, beware of all that hope, not to mention friends who move away, who tell stories and then start crying, which means you have to rub their backs and think about those kids and their families, or imagine the little girl in the church, her face all screwed up, and her mind. What about her mind? Then I drive home, and there are 5 deer sitting on the snow in my backyard. And yes, I know, they eat your tulips and your pansies, and there's nothing otherworldly about them. The point is, I'm city, so 5 of anything, and I'm backing up. No antlers means they're female, right? One was chewing something. Otherwise, they were just calmly watching me, their eyes so sweet and dumb. And you know where this is going, of course. How when I get cold and rush inside, and the deer all turn toward the window, even though I didn't turn on the light, that it's too late to act as if my kitchen is just a kitchen. And that cheap wall clock ticking too loudly behind me, who'd think that's what I'd be holding on to when I finally let go? Intermezzo for Phoebe Snow. Sometimes you hear a song like her song that fits like a ripe plum in your hand. The sweet flesh and tart skin of her voice, simply what it is. Like tall grass gone to flower, the simplest of yellows. Or the right man opening a jar and handing it back to you, smiling. The jar holding something you'd almost forgotten. I have to thank Rita for that title. Semester abroad. A room in a house just outside of Paris. No idea I'd be sharing the bath with Jose, a little Brazilian who could have passed for one of my cousins, that particular mix of African, native, and empire. I couldn't understand a word he said. French poured through a Portuguese accent, plus the landlady didn't like him. All I needed to justify my annoyance of the bathroom situation. But weeks in, and the landlady on vacances, the power went out. So Jose lit candles, invited me to share his pasta with creme fraiche. He'd never met his father either, though his mother's boyfriend bought him art supplies, paid for drawing classes. I was surprised he was vegetarian too, that French was his 3rd language, that I was the provincial. Nothing happened between us, not even after the bottle of Beaujolais, not even though I'd been looking for someone to save me from being bored and lonely in Paris of all places. Only our shadows touching across the walls of that tiny kitchen, city lights blinking through the foggy window, and the realization that I was no longer translating each word he said, that I understood him, but even stranger, us. Our faces, our very names, the spoils of conquest. Our passports and the languages we spoke and why. Our fathers and fathers' fathers, the backstory of millions whittled down to a few pages in high school. The cowboy and Indian movies my mother refused to stop watching, that I rent for her years later when she was dying. Flying across the Atlantic over the bones of God knows how many Africans, and yet forgetting to even look down, to remember them if only for a few seconds. Yes, the unimaginable absence and lack, and yet the unknown alive and well in that kitchen too, its consequences and contradictions, its silences and hysterics, the blackness in our voices as we laughed and talked through the night, a keening but also a kind of space, a clearing we could move through. This next poem is a double sonnet that I wrote this semester in Deborah's class. Late spring. It can't all be wild ginger and cherry blossoms. Sometimes there's bound to be a man standing on a hill above the river with his young son and yellow dog, telling the dog to jump. Losing his patience after the second time, the dog looking from the man to the rush of thrashing water, runoff from the dam, runoff from the canal, water from two directions, forced into a small pool, a long drop. The dog's confusion obvious from where I'm standing on this favorite trail, on this wished-for day, after weeks of cold and drizzle. Everything in me until this moment, reaching up, grateful weed, finally free of the dirt. But it's not all prairie sedge and lilac bushes. A father is a man, not a leaf blade unfurling, not a patch of skunk cabbage or culver's root. The boy is maybe 6. The man, oblivious to me, the other walkers, the tall shoots of what looks like poppy, he takes a step, one step, and the dog jumps. Is the air holding its breath? Is the water? Of course, I keep walking, though perhaps more slowly, and the dog is fine, manages to swim, to climb out and shake, to head up the grassy hill to his master, the man lighting a cigarette, staring off. And the boy, his son, the look on his face never changes, though it's the opposite of a look, really. Perhaps as far from a look as a face can get, not even blank. Okay, 2 more. This poem was actually a prompt that was given by one of our visiting poets, Natalie Diaz. This poem is not about Facebook. Or me posing in front of the ocean with my girls from undergrad in our royal blue dresses, none of my other friends imagining me in a sorority, surprised at how large I am, my contradictions. And oh, cousins I haven't seen in years, your politics, your cute grandchildren. Oh, poets bonded with over a week of nonstop poetry, my new family. Oh, friend of a friend, wishing your queen a happy birthday, praising Jesus, praying for the Dallas Cowboys. I scroll down you, I look for the end of the page. I forged through this vast, mixed up, overflowing, puffed up, brilliant, confused, too happy nation. All the streets, mountains, weddings, and camel rides familiar, yet none of them where I live. It's 50 degrees in January in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm wondering why I'm not afraid. Why some people can walk on the moon and never leave home, while others are born waving the wrong flag. I'm staring out at a day where there are no car bombs, no father putting his child back together like a jigsaw puzzle. Yet I see the blue of our dresses against the Atlantic, and I make the connection. I remember what I should never forget. O kin of everything packed inside this fat, shiny now. This morning, I sit in a noisy cafe where there are no whites-only signs, where my young sisters are studying to be whatever the hell they want. I touch a line of blue text, and without so much as an abracadabra, I watch millions marching like it's 1963. None of it magic. And this is my final poem, which is actually a celebration of the fall, but it's short and fairly happy, and it felt like the right poem to end on. So, Cathedral. Not that I needed reminding, but even the trees, like giant awestruck grown in the laboratory of a mad brother. The nerdy Nerudian of my dreams, who somehow isolated the colors of all the saddest love songs in the world. Baby, baby red, and please, please, please yellow. Yes, even the browns are talking to me. The greens blue in this early autumn light that makes everything shout. And where's my hopeless agnostic when I need her? Foreseer of endless wars and sorrows. Is that her running towards that old abandoned church, cathedral of shadow and grass? The leaves above trembling like tambourines, two happy squirrels dancing down the aisle. Thank you.
Hi. Hi. Can you hear me? I thought someone was going to introduce me. So I'm here at Michael. I'm introducing Adam Roux, who I don't think, who without any doubt will be one of the most original writers American world will be reading in many years to come. Yeah, I'm really convinced about that. Okay, so I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, let me begin here. I think one of the phenomenal qualities to Adam's writing is that all of his work, none of them have the vanity often associated with highly creative individuals. None of them. Yeah. And his writing breathes heavily on the themes of the process of man and his becoming, the process of dislocation or estrangement, the theme of memory and foreignness, the vitality of communication, the longing to speak and yet incapable of doing so. Yeah, and his breath on these themes is weighty yet incredibly warm. That shared combination of mad skills that exists abundantly in American writing from early 20th century to the middle. Yeah, the kind of humans moving between spaces in his works are people fleeing from past loves and seeking new meanings elsewhere. The people who reconnect to emphasize the meaning of hope, distance the power that remains from the particles of event of years ago. And central to his writing is that lonely, rich, mature voice that takes the reader to the restaurant and parties in New York, the flat and street in London, all the way to the Japanese town where its people and rural bodies come to life. Another thing must silence, yeah. Silence is a strong motive in Adam's hands, deliberate attempt or not. This silence or the struggle to interrupt it becomes a system of peeling off the layers of the past instead of deploying the popular strategy of flashbacks, which for me, I'm stealing from him. Here. Or in better words, memory as presented in his writing strongly works into the present when one confronts intensity in the silence. But what moves me most in his writing is his language. It is deliberate, observant, and bears in its belly a glow of the archaic. I've never been this close to anyone writing with such calm. So join me to welcome. I don't, where are you?
I was sitting there thinking that is literally one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me. I mean, no joke, that is up there. So thank you, Michael. Where did you go? There you are. Thank you. So I want to start off by saying that this program has, can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay, good. This program has felt like a huge gift to me, and the time that I've been given here, I hope I've done it justice. It's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire life. I want to thank the other members of my cohort, the first year fiction people for their insight. I want to thank Jeb and Barbara for everything that they do for us. Chris, of course, and Jeff, who for their input, and of course Jane, for my thesis advisor, for everything. I also want to thank my parents for making the trip down to be here today, and Helen, who's read everything from day one, and who has dealt with the stress of deadlines for thesis and workshop and all the other things. Go over Mahagat. I thank you for everything. Okay, so I'm last, and I tried to choose the most exciting bit of my story, which is to say the last bit of my story. Many of you already know what that means. It's basically two men. It's a bar story. What you need to know is there's two guys in a bar. They're trapped in there because of a storm. There's a man named Alex who's telling the narrator about an incident in this coastal Japanese town where they both taught English. The narrator wasn't present for this incident. He'd already returned to the United States. The town is called O. There's the girlfriend the narrator has left behind in Japan is named Miho. Alex, who's telling the story, has a girlfriend named Yoshiko. There's also a bartender and a woman. In the bar, if I summarize any more, I'm just going to be telling the story. So we'll just start. Okay. Alex took a breath and began. I was in a classroom. It was the first period after lunch, the start of my last class. I remember being in the middle of some gesture to demonstrate the meaning of a verb. I find it ridiculous that the word or object or whatever I was demonstrating is not something I will remember forever. I was in a car accident when I was 16, my fault. I rear-ended this old woman and sent her spinning off the road and into the forest. It was because I was trying to turn at my stereo. Running from my car towards hers, I couldn't see her on the driver's seat, and I thought I would remember the song that was playing for the rest of my life. I was so terrified. But you know, now I can't remember it at all. And the woman was fine. She needed a couple of stitches. That was it. In the classroom that day, up on the second story of the junior high, up on the hill overlooking O and the school where you had taught, where Miho still taught, I was in the middle of some motion. I remember having an arm raised, but I don't know if that's true. There was a rumbling. All the students knew the feeling. They started going, jishin, 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 sitting up and echoing each other like prairie dogs, spreading the alarm. The English teacher for the second years, Kudo-sensei, she started going, Hai, minasan, tsukoi no shita ni hayaku hayaku, and the students obeyed her and ducked under their desks. We were in earthquakes all the time over there. Part of you is always a little scared, but you wait, and at some point it starts to fall away. It's like turbulence on a flight. You clench, you wait, you release. But at the moment I thought the quake would dissipate. It didn't, and so I waited through the next instant, and then the next. I was standing at the front of the class, telling myself, it will get no worse than this, then this, then this, and of course it continued. By the time I accepted that it would continue, I could no longer stand. Kudo-sensei was on her knees going, yabai, yabai, yabai. Over the rumble of the earth, I could hear some of the students crying. None of us had ever been in something this strong before. It went on far too long. We were trapped there, waiting. There was no action we could take, no worse or better decision to make. There were no choices at all. I looked it up later. We waited for 6 minutes, though I do not know what exactly that is a measurement of. Since then, I have sometimes set a timer and sat completely still for 6 minutes just to see how long it feels. Control for the experiment. In those 6 minutes, the island of Honshu walked 8 feet to the east, and the axis on which the earth rotates permanently shifted. I did not have any visions. I did not catalog my regrets or shames or loves. I saw no one's face. I merely hung off the lip of the chalkboard and begged the plates to be still. Then the shaking finally stopped, and we were all still there. I was terrified and confused, but now also in awe. Experiencing the quake in its entirety, through to its end, felt like some kind of miracle. In the quiet that came after, some of the students began to emerge from under their desks, still afraid. Many stayed curled beneath, unsure. Before, the desks had been laid out in a neat grid pattern. Now they were scattered around the room. The weight of the students had done nothing to anchor them. Kudo-sensei recovered herself, got to her feet. She had been teaching in middle schools for longer than I had been alive. Her voice was unsteady. "Okay, everyone," she said. "It's over. Now, outside, you know the drill." Alex did not shake as he told me this, as I expected. His eyes rested on the edge of the table between us. He drank in quick, harsh gulps as he spoke. I motioned to the bartender, and he brought more. I wonder if he had heard us. He carried the pints to us like an altar boy. He did not turn to go back to the bar. Instead, he backed away. Outside, the rain. Alex continued. The students streamed through the hallways and down the stairs. All of us, teachers included, still trying to gather ourselves afterward. In the halls, the students spoke in murmurs. "You okay?" they asked each other. "Were you scared?" "I was scared. I was so scared." "How big do you think that was? An 8? I've been in a 7. "Okay, everyone, keep moving, keep moving." They lined up by class in the schoolyard and were counted. Everyone took a breath. The air was clear. Nothing was shouted. There would be aftershocks, but we could expect them, and by being expected, they would not be as bad. There wasn't much for me to do, so I texted Yoshiko. "Big one," she said. "So scary." I texted Miho too, but she didn't respond. I thought she was busy evacuating and corralling her kids, scared as they must have been. From up on the hill, I could see most of the town, including the elementary school where she worked. I couldn't see if they were out in the schoolyard yet. Later, talking to Yoshiko, I found that the two of them had been furiously texting the entire time, until the phones cut. Interrupting Alex's story, I said, "She texted me. From Japan, she texted me. In Japanese, no time for English. Big earthquake," she said. "I'm okay. Miss you." That was it. It was Thursday night in New York. I was in bed. I had gone out to a bar that night, drank too much, was already deep asleep. I woke up in the morning and texted her back. I even told my parents I'd heard from her, that she was fine. What I heard after that, I heard from Yoshiko. Alex nodded. Then, Alex said, "The water came within an hour. For some reason, the sirens strung along the waterfront didn't go off. They were supposed to. They were wired to some national earthquake service. So the water came with no warning. Someone shouted from the edge of the baseball field, 'The sea!' Someone was at the edge of the field, which was the edge of the hill, pointing down at the town. That's all I remember, the shape of a human standing there. One student abandoned his place in the orderly lines, then another, and then there was a rush to the chain-link fence. The teachers ran with them. We saw the boats in the harbor rising, bucking, snapping their moorings. Water was already pushing at the concrete walls of the harbor, 12 feet high. The vice principal, a graying man with liver spots and sleepy eyes, stood in front of everyone and said, "Everyone stays here, do you understand? All students, all teachers remain right here." I walked up to Kudo-sensei. "If there is a tsunami, the sirens make noise, right?" And Kudo-sensei looked at me and said, maybe not today. Maybe they are broken." The unmoored fishing boats were bunching at the top of the concrete barriers. Cars were still speeding along the harbor road that hugged the barriers, perhaps oblivious of what was happening 12 feet above them. Surely, I thought again, it will get no worse than this. And then, at one point along the wall, then another, then along the entirety of the wall, the boats spilled over, the water coming with them into the town. It began to fill the streets. Small wooden structures buckled almost immediately from the pressure. The Lawson, the Ramanya near the drinking district. I can't remember its name, even though we went there all the time after long nights out. Then the entire drinking district went under. From where I stood on the hill, I could see cars backing up on the elevated parts of the bypass that looped through the town. The water rose, the drivers backed their cars up further, and then they were huddled at the top of their small islands. There were 2 spots where this was happening. The drivers got out. On each elevated point, I could see them gesture, arms waving. I watched a small black car dart through the village. It turned left, then right, gunning through the hills, fleeing the water. The village had been laid out hundreds of years ago, a warren, charmingly so, you and I both thought. There were a few straight shots out of town. Soon the black car was driving on roads that were wet, the tires spraying. The car came to an intersection and turned left, but the water came from around the corner. I saw the front of the car move laterally, as if its axes of movement were suddenly cleared and reset when the water nudged it. The car spun, then tipped, and was carried forward. On one elevated section of the overpass, the drivers were climbing on top of their cars. The other was now inundated, the drivers gone. As Alex spoke, I could tell he was ashamed to be telling me this. He kept his eyes on the tabletop, embarrassed. The jukebox began playing a song. It was low and grinding art rock. The bartender walked over and stood in front of the machine for a moment, puzzling over it. Then he kneeled down, reached around behind the jukebox, and pulled the plug. We could hear the wind again. Alex said, All around me, the students wailed. They shrieked and paced and cried as they watched the destruction of their town. Many of them could not watch, just as many could not help but watch. I turned to Kudo-sensei to ask her something, but I couldn't figure out what I wanted to ask her. She was, in some manner, in charge of me. I wanted someone to issue instructions beyond stay. I wanted to be told where the sandbags were kept, where the skiffs were moored. But the water rose and lifted the roofs off the houses, floated them away. And on the roofs, people waved, fanned their arms at us, and were carried out to the harbor. The school at O, near the water, was inundated quickly. The water first smashed through the delivery door that faced the harbor, then the students' entrance, then the first grade classroom, then Miho's classroom, then the teacher's room, and so on, all the way to the gymnasium, which is where, later, they found most of the bodies. I didn't see the water rise around it. I couldn't really pick it out by the time I realized what was happening. Only later did I see the gymnasium, the tallest part of the building, protruding from the water. The gym, newer than the rest of the building, was made of cinder blocks, but they did not hold, and the structure collapsed. I tried texting Yoshiko. I couldn't reach her. Already, somewhere, the water had cut off power, knocked off phone service. In a panic, unthinking, I ran. In running, I disobeyed. I refused to participate. This would not be who I was. I was wearing a suit and tie, and I ran from the schoolyard. The teachers were occupied with the students, and I ran from the yard past the town hall and home. You ran, I said to Alex. When I said this, his jaw clenched. He was not proud of this. He had admitted it to me in hope of being absolved. Alex continued. The face of our apartment building had a large crack running up through the concrete. It was wide at the bottom, slivering up towards the roof. In the foyer, old Miura-san was trying to get down the stairs with her cane. The door of her apartment was left open. There was a crack in my door, while the door of Miranda's apartment, your old apartment, was intact. I asked Miura-san if she was all right. Her face had fear in it, but not the kind I expected. My cat, she said. He ran away. She paused in her efforts to descend, holding out a hand towards me. The hand, extended straight out, was pale and thick-fingered and shaking. She was asking for help. As I eased her down to ground level, she made small talk. I'm fine, yes, I'm fine, but I have to find my little one. That was a big one, eh? A big earthquake. I realized that she had not yet seen. In her mind, O still stood. I didn't have the heart to take her outside. Alex paused in telling his story. Or maybe he'd run out of things to say. The bartender, I realized, was standing behind the bar, hands on the wood, listening. So was the woman with the baby carriage. Her phone sat forgotten on her table. It was the sound of her baby waking that disturbed them. The woman picked up the child, held him. Shh, she said to the baby. She was still looking at us. The bartender asked about the baby's name. Matthew, said the woman. His name is Matthew, after my father. She said the name again, looking down at the child in her arms, shushing it. Matthew. The metal shutters at the front of the bar rattled. Through the walls came the sound of wind screaming down the street. Alex had finished his pint, I had finished mine. We'd gone through what mattered to me. What mattered to him was just beginning. For years, I had known everything he just told me. I had heard all the reports, contacted everyone but him. I knew the facts, but not the story. But now, I realized I wanted to hear the rest, to hear his part, to hear what happened next. Thank you. I'm going to ask all the second years to come up for one last thing.
Thank you again so much for coming. And as you've heard from all of us, we are so incredibly grateful to this program and those who keep it running and keep it running so smoothly. So we just wanted to give a few end-of-year gifts to these people. So first, Barbara.
We're so grateful for your kindness, Barbara. All of the motherly guidance you give us. You really make this program a family. And we're just so grateful. Because you do so much for us that we wanted to give something back to you, and we wanted it to be a bit of a lasting gift, so something that you won't have to worry about for the next year. So we've all pitched in, and we've collected money for your parking pass. So this is for your parking next year.
do so much. We are so incredibly grateful. I know for me, specifically, you've been a huge resource as I've been teaching for the first time, and I think for all of us, we felt like we can go to you and ask those strange, bizarre questions that come up for teaching your first time. You also just do so much to keep the program going, and we're incredibly grateful. So we just wanted to give you a nice, relaxing night or so with your wife.
Yeah.
And Jane, you've brought so many new and wonderful ideas to the program. Your dedication, generosity, and motivation are so clear to us. And it's not clear to us everything you do in the background. We don't envy your workload, but we envy its effect, and that's keeping us challenged and excited. And just, we're so grateful for everything you do.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I'm going to hug everyone else later. I'm not a hugger, but I expect that. Can I just say how honored I am to be with these people who have written such incredibly powerful stuff. I've already wept 3 times today. I've laughed sick. So thank all of you, and congratulations. And yes, as you just said, now the party. It actually doesn't start for a little bit. There are posters in the back for any family, Jeb is telling me. I'm just saying what I'm hearing. Posters that one can take home and maybe have signed by the writers, all kinds of things. But then the party over in the Colonnade Club, right, in not long. And there we will dance and drink and eat and talk. Thanks everybody for coming.